Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Stephen Buffalo, and I'm the proud member of the Samson Cree Nation in Treaty 6, and also very honored to be part of the Alberta Next panel. I'd like to take a minute to recognize the land. Today, on this beautiful day, we acknowledge that we're gathered here on Treaty 8 territory. We honor the ancestral territories of the Cree, the Dene, and the Métis peoples who have walked and cared for this land for generations. For our people, and for the people who have come before us and who will come after us, and for who are here tonight. Let's have a great discussion about our great province. I'd like to now take this time and introduce our moderator, our master of ceremonies, former teammate of mine, record 1 penalty minute in the Junior B League in Medicine Hat, Alberta, Bruce McAllister.
Thank you, my friend. Thank you, Stephen Buffalo, my good and longtime friend. And he's wrong. It was actually 2 penalty minutes. But I think it was for shooting the puck over the glass or something like that. He was a good guy to hide behind. Good evening, Fort McMurray. Great to see you all. Thanks for being here tonight. My name, as Stephen said, is Bruce McAllister. I'm here to moderate tonight. The Premier is here, and we will hear from Premier Smith in just a moment. We have just an amazing panel with us tonight, and I just want you to know these are regular Albertans like you who care about Alberta, who have a diverse background and probably suggestions on where we might go, what we might do. We've assembled a great group of people that have volunteered their time. I'll introduce you to them momentarily. But again, thank you. Thank you all for coming. I want to remind you that we're here to hear from you this evening. So I'll set the scene a little bit and just say that the last decade has been difficult for Alberta policy-wise when dealing with Alberta. We put this panel together, and the Premier will make some introductory comments in a moment, as a way to address some of the issues that are on the minds of Albertans and people like you, give you an outlet to offer suggestions to your government. So we're going to do that this evening, and a few housekeeping rules, and this probably won't apply to the great majority of you, but we ask that you be respectful. Obviously, we won't tolerate any swearing or anything like that at the podium. We want to make sure that everybody gets to the mic that we can, so 1 question each. And we want as many people to be able to give us their opinions and questions tonight as possible. And questions need to be on topic. It is Alberta Next. So what we'll do, and I'll set the scene in a minute, but what we'll do is we'll play a video for you on the topic, and then we'll call anybody that might have questions or comments on that topic to the mic, and you can go ahead and have your 45 seconds. So again, I'll explain that in a few minutes, but it should be good. Looking forward to a great discussion tonight. And we'll be here for 2.5 hours or so together. So without further ado, let's meet our panel. And you can probably hold your applause to the end or clap right away if you like. But the chair of this panel is the Premier of Alberta, that is Danielle Smith. We have MLA Brandon Lunty, elected in May of 2023, MLA for Leduc-Beaumont. The president of Questerre Energy and a key figure in the Canadian energy sector is Michael Binion. MLA Tara Sawyer, newly elected MLA, representing Olds Didsbury Three Hills. Dr. Benny Zhu, a registered acupuncturist with over 30 years of experience and a great perspective on so many issues. Adam Legg is the president of the Business Council of Alberta, who is also able to talk to us about those issues. Stephen Buffalo, my good friend and president and CEO of the Indian Resource Council of Canada. Stephen. Minister Rebecca Schultz, 2-term MLA since 2019, of course, our Environment and Protected Areas Minister. From the University of Calgary, economics professor and fiscal policy expert at the School of Public Policy, Dr. Trevor Toom. The Honourable Bruce MacDonald, former Alberta Court of Appeal Justice from 2009 to 2023. Dr. Aiken Okaswati, a family and emergency doctor in Didsbury, section chief for the Didsbury Hospital, and so much more around Alberta. Dr. Aiken, thank you for giving your time for us. MLA Glenn Van Dyken, a guy I like to call a country gentleman, the MLA for Athabasca Barhead Westlock, and a long-serving MLA. Melody Garner-Skiba, experienced leader across agriculture and nonprofit sectors and former president of the Lethbridge Chamber of Commerce. Samita Aman is the chair of the Premier's Council on Multiculturalism and a prominent advocate for many in Alberta. Samita. Andrew Judson, with nearly 30 years in capital markets and private equity, focused on energy finance and taxation from the Fraser Institute. And Grant Fagerheim is not with us tonight, but he is another oil and gas expert, and I know we probably got a few of them here tonight because we are in the heart of that industry here in Fort McMurray. So. Anyway, thank you for the gracious welcoming of our panel, and thank you to all of your panelists for volunteering your time. Now, before I explain how things go this evening, in a little more in depth, I think it's probably appropriate that we set the scene for you, and no better person to do that than the Premier of the province, and that is Danielle Smith. Would you please welcome her to the podium?
Well, thank you, Bruce, very much for getting us started today. And thank you as well to Stephen Buffalo for the land acknowledgement. We appreciate that. I'm glad that you're here moderating this evening, and I want to thank each of our panelists for being here tonight and for your participating in this important moment in Alberta's history. And I'm very pleased to be here in Fort McMurray with all of my fellow Alberta panelists as well. I understand that your two fantastic MLAs are here as well. Brian Jean, our Minister of Energy and Minerals, and Tanya Yao, he is here as well. So I know Bruce said that if we could stay on topic, that the fact that they're here, if there are any local issues, I'll just steer you towards them at the end so that you can talk to them if there are any things that you want to pursue. And we just had a great aerial tour of the region before we came here as well. You've got a really great local business that does that so that we can get a real sense of what's happening in this community. And it's amazing. It's absolutely amazing what is happening up here. Tonight we are bringing to you one of our discussion, but one I would say you're bringing to us an awareness of what's happening in our most important region in the province, really the epicenter of Alberta's mighty oil sands. And to say Fort McMurray and surrounding area has an outsized impact on our economy would be an understatement by a lot. A huge percentage of Canada's total exports are produced right here. This gives Fort McMurray and the regional municipality of Wood Buffalo an immense impact. And not just on Alberta's fortunes, but on Canada's too. There are schools and hospitals and roads across the country that are built thanks to the work that you do right here. And millions of Canadians fuel their vehicles with energy products from this region. Without you, grocery store shelves would be empty, planes would be grounded, and cars would freeze up in the winter. Tonight is your opportunity to influence the future direction of Alberta, and I want to thank each of you for coming out to share your thoughts with us today and for choosing to participate in this crucial engagement process. The conversations that we have tonight and throughout the Alberta Next engagement period will help to shape the future of this province. And I would encourage you to go and look at the last time the government did this with the Fair Deal panel in 2019 and 2020, and the people of Alberta came up with 25 recommendations that have guided our work over the last 5 years. I'll give you some examples. We had the equalization referendum that came out of our Fair Deal panel process. The panel wanted us to reduce internal trade barriers, and we have done that across the country. In fact, there's renewed effort to do that on the part of every premier. They wanted us to create economic corridors, and we have signed many economic corridors agreements with Saskatchewan and Manitoba, and then more recently with Saskatchewan and Ontario, as well as with the Yukon. They wanted us to challenge federal legislation in our areas of jurisdiction. And we have done that in spades. I think we've got about 15 lawsuits going in that regard. They wanted us to establish a chief firearms officer, which we did. They wanted us to create a presence in Ottawa, which we have. We now have an office in Ottawa representing us. They wanted us to diversify our energy sector, and that has also been done in spades. Relentlessly pursue more market access, As well, the ideas for referenda and citizen-initiated referenda came out of that process as well. And so that's just an example of the kind of ideas that came out of this kind of process. And I'm looking forward to hearing what you have to say for us this evening. For the last 10 years, Ottawa, led by the Liberal government, has taken direct aim at Alberta's core industries, from Bill C-69, the No More Pipelines law, to the tanker ban, to the oil and gas emission cap, which we all know is a production cap, to their net zero mandate on electricity and vehicles. In just the last 10 years alone, more than $500 billion in global investment capital destined for our resource sector has disappeared. It's cost us hundreds of thousands of jobs, hundreds of billions in GDP, and resource royalties that would have otherwise been able to be used for healthcare and education and public infrastructure. If Canada is to be a strong and unified country, it must include a strong and sovereign Alberta within a united Canada, able to pursue our own potential without being held back by our own country and our own federal government. Regardless of what each of us thinks about these issues or which path we think is best, we as Albertans must be able to respectfully debate and discuss these issues here and with our friends and our family members and our neighbors. Because I know that if we do, in the end, our province will find the best solutions to the immense challenges that we face, and we will come out stronger and more free than ever. I will always put my faith in Albertans to find that right path, because I trust you. Now, the videos you're about to see are going to lay out the themes of Alberta Next, things that we have been hearing about, sometimes for years, sometimes for decades, just to hear what you have to say about us pursuing those potentially, and ways that we can achieve a stronger Alberta within United Canada. And then, of course, we've got an open mic so that we can hear if there's anything that we missed that's on your mind that you think we should do. We're looking forward to hearing that too. So thank you so much for participating in this process, and I'll hand it back over to our moderator.
Okay, we have 6 videos tonight to show you, and here's what we'll do. So when the video plays, and the topics will be equalization and transfers, Alberta pension plan, provincial police force, constitutional changes, immigration reform, and provincial tax collection. So we'll play a video, and then we will allow for 15 minutes discussion on each topic. So if that's the topic that you wish to speak to, I'll ask you to head to the microphone when the video plays or when it's finished so that you can have your time. And you'll have 45 seconds to make your point, ask your question, or make your comment. And again, as the Premier said, there may be some of you with some burning local issues, and that's fine. We totally get that. That's why we've got a couple of local MLAs here. You can certainly approach them, but we want to focus tonight on Alberta Next, our relationship with Ottawa, and some of Albertans' suggestions to deal with that, because this is about our province's future. So while the video plays, again, feel free to head to the microphone, and we'll try to keep one speaker. So we've had some events, folks, where we've had people lining up for all 6 topics, and what we find is that just takes away from those that would like to speak to another one. So we considerably ask you to keep it to one, and if for some reason we have a shortage at the microphone, then feel free to speak to another. And if you have a question, great. Again, if it's just a comment, that's fine too. And without further ado, I think we can get to it. So, with that in mind, let us roll the first video on equalization and transfers.
Our next topic is reforming federal equalization and transfers. Since 2005, Alberta taxpayers have contributed, on average, $23 billion more per year to the federal government in federal taxes than they received back in projects, benefits, and other spending from Ottawa. That's a net loss to Albertans of nearly $500 billion in just 20 years. Most of those redistributed Alberta tax dollars are spent by Ottawa and Quebec and other liberal-leaning provinces across the country. And part of that massive fiscal transfer out of Alberta comes through the Federal Equalization Program, which has seen Alberta pay over $67 billion into the program since 1957, while receiving back not a single penny since 1965. In 2021, Albertans voted in a referendum to remove equalization from the Constitution, but Ottawa completely ignored us. So what next? Alberta can't stop these federal transfers on its own. The Alberta government doesn't write a check to Ottawa each year, and we can't ask Albertans to stop paying their federal taxes. The fact is, fixing this problem will require political support from other provinces. One option that would be appealing to most other provinces is to have the provinces collect a larger share of overall taxes. This is how it could work. Currently, Ottawa collects over 60% of all the federal and provincial taxes that Canadians pay. The Ottawa bureaucracy takes its portion, with the remainder inefficiently and unequally distributed to the provinces. The dollars we do get back have a lot of strings attached, forcing us to run our provincial programs and build infrastructure the way Ottawa wants us to. No provinces want that, especially the big ones like Quebec, Ontario, BC, and Alberta. What if we cut out the middleman and instead had provincial governments that are responsible for delivering health, education, and social services collect around 60% of all taxes, with Ottawa receiving the rest? Ottawa, in turn, would be able to end most transfer programs to the provinces, along with all the strings, bureaucracy, and waste attached to them. Quebec has already proposed having the federal government let provinces keep GST revenue generated in their provinces in return for ending the federal health transfer. Seems like a great idea. Why not apply that same logic to all federal transfers? Less money collected and wasted in Ottawa. Less federal transfers with only a modest amount of equalization for the smallest provinces and territories that actually need it. And more funds for provincial health, education, and other programs, without strings attached by Ottawa's politicians and bureaucrats. That seems like something most provinces could rally behind. So what say you, Alberta? Should Alberta take a lead role in working with the other provinces to reform federal transfers and equalization by having the provinces collect a larger share of overall taxes, with Ottawa collecting less? And are there any other strategies Alberta should be looking at to alleviate the massive federal fiscal drain to Alberta? For more information, visit alberta.ca/next.
Okay. So we have two microphones here and here, and we'll ask you to go ahead and line up. And if you'd like to make a comment or ask a question, feel free. And it's tough for me to see here with the lights, but do we have somebody over here to kick us off? We do not. So, and over here, we do. Go ahead.
Hi, Michael. Hi, Rebecca. Hi, Stephen. How are you? And how's my favorite premier in the history of all of Alberta? Can we get a round of applause for Danielle Smith? My name is Rob Picard, and I'm personal friends with most people up there, and I think we have the best premier and who fights for us, and who's aggressive, and candidly has, you know, the biggest balls of all the premiers in all of Canada. So one more round of applause for Danielle. My question is for Premier Smith and my friend Michael Binion. I like what you said about Quebec. Quebec, you know, they seem to kind of get out of their contribution to Canada. Is it feasible to take their resources that they are not using right now and apply that to the system in a sense?
What a great way to start the evening. I owe you $20 for sure, Robbie, for that. Mr. Binion, you want to jump in?
Well, Robbie Picard is one of my favorites too, here from from Fort McMurray, and my family. I was born in Calgary. My grandparents were born all over Alberta, but I've never been to Fort McMurray, so I'm really pleased to be here. Thanks. Yeah, so I'll just make the one comment. The reason Robbie's asking me that question is my company discovered a very large natural gas project in Quebec, and I'll just give you a couple of points. One was one of the premiers, Pauline Marois, at one point said publicly, "Why should we develop our oil and gas? It would just reduce the equalization that we get." And so I don't actually mind the idea that if just like if a person's in hard times or a province is in hard times, that we might not want to help them out. But if you create a system that creates systemizes that to the point where a premier might say, "Hey, let's not even bother to develop our economy or our resources because we don't want to lose our equalization," it feels like there's something that needs to be changed. And so I certainly agree with the question of this video that Alberta should take a lead role in trying to change it.
All right, Robbie, thank you. And Trevor, we have technical analysis we can provide to this, and probably will from other panelists, including the Premier, as the night goes on, but we'll go to another question over here.
Hello, my name is Clyde Phillips. Like Robbie, I'm a huge fan of the Premiers. I began university...
You guys are using up your time on that, so...
Yeah. When I was 17 in 1985, I began my political science degree. And in 1987, studying Canadian government, I was very enthused about the Reform Party. I see the word reform up here on the screen. And one thing I believe with knowing about the populist ideology, I love to see the Premier take initiative to try to become someone that could change the Constitution as Prime Minister and look at an actual realistic strategy as we saw with the Reform Party in 1987, which kind of became what it is here today. And I actually believe that you have the capacity to make those changes more so as Prime Minister with a populist party that could be create fervor virtually overnight.
All right. Well over 45, but great question. So it was a constitution question, but this is equalization.
I think he was also asking me if I was going to run for Prime Minister, to which I will have to say no. You know, the joke that I make is I go to bed and sleep so well at night because I don't spend 1 minute thinking about how to win votes in Toronto or Montreal. So I just think about how to win votes here. But there is we have a whole other section about whether we should be looking at constitutional change. So you may want to come up and give your ideas. I think there's about 9 different topics that we pursue in that video. So come back up to the mic when that one comes. And you can tell me which ones you like the best.
Excellent. Thank you. So equalization and transfers. Go ahead, sir.
Hi. Appreciate everybody being here, the panel, and of course the Premier. I'm just going to keep it short here because the clock's ticking. Okay, so given, as shown in the video, given that Alberta's interest in prosperity depends on having cooperative partners, whether that is federal government or other provinces, we're hearing about all solutions that hinge on cooperation. But history has shown time and again that these efforts have been largely ineffective. Meanwhile, the area that matter most to Albertans, pipelines, immigration, international trade, and even interprovincial trade remain stalled and tied up in red tape. My question is, why are we still putting our hope in cooperative solutions that clearly don't deliver and are out of our control when the real leverage and perhaps the only path to meaningful results comes from a sovereign Alberta?
Okay. Premier?
There's a couple things. I might get Trevor Toome to comment on the equalization formula. Like some people will say, well, is there any point in trying to change the equalization formula? And he's got a good history of how many times it's changed in the past. And so I'd like him to talk about that. But just on the positive side of things, I can tell you the conversation that the premiers are having today around the table is a 180 from where we were 12 months ago. So 12 months ago, what we were talking about is how do we stop the federal government from continuing to beat us down with terrible law after terrible law after terrible law. And now we have the other premier saying, stop picking on Alberta and start addressing some of the issues. And we're doing joint communiques about how each one of us can develop our own resources. And that it doesn't matter what political stripe it is, because what we discovered through this C-69 process is it affects every mining project in the country as well. And so I think that is, with the election of Donald Trump in the United States, it caused a major recalibration on the part of all of the premiers. I think everybody just assumed the North-South trade ties would continue as firm and strong as ever, and we'd never have to think about finding new markets. Now they see that that relationship is precarious, and the only way that we're going to be able to develop new markets is by working with each other and supporting each other. Now we just have to get the federal government to agree to that. But I think that it's a major milestone to have the provinces in such accord on that. And maybe some of the other panelists might be able to talk about whether they've seen this in the past with the provinces being this aligned, but I can tell you it is a major difference. But I still would like Professor Toom to talk about the history on equalization.
For sure, Premier. I wanted to say, Professor Toom, that was my wild card to end this segment, but because you've called on him, let's hear from him right now. Professor Toom, go ahead.
Sure, thank you. So I think in any conversation about fiscal transfers or public finances generally in our federation, it's important to remind ourselves that Canada is so incredibly diverse, culture, history, languages, but importantly for this conversation, our economies are very different from one part of the country to another. And we're also one of the most decentralized federations in the world. And so some kind of a program that helps less well-off regions, I'm thinking here the territories and the Maritimes in particular, fulfill their responsibility, health and education, that's always existed. But balancing these regional tensions because of the big differences has always been very hard. And so throughout history, right from the very beginning, we have concerns raised around the structure and design details of federal-provincial transfers. And concerns raised by some regions are typically responded to productively by the federal government. Indeed, the last time we had a major equalization reform, it was led by an Albertan, Al O'Brien, right? And that was a really successful reform implemented by Stephen Harper in 2007. Prior to that, another major change to the program was led by concerns raised by Newfoundland and Labrador, primarily around the development of offshore resources, really needing a change to the program so that they wouldn't lose out as a result of developing resources. So tons of examples of provinces leading to national change in big, important ways in these programs. And right now, it's been nearly 2 decades without a serious look at the program. We're just a couple of years away from that being the longest stretch of time where no serious review has actually occurred. And I think it's due. There's lots of ways in which the program can be changed, and historically, it's provinces that lead that conversation. And maybe I'll loop back to the very first question that we had around Quebec. Could you incorporate into the program some measure of what their resource revenues could be? Well, that's kind of how most of the formula works right now. We don't ask how much personal income tax or sales tax revenue you actually raise. We ask what you could raise at some average level of taxation. We just don't do that for resources. And it's tricky to do, but some small changes in how we treat hydroelectricity revenues, which are very important in Quebec, can have a very, very big change. Just to illustrate magnitudes here, if Quebec's power prices were 2 cents a kilowatt higher, and they would still maintain the lowest power prices, 2 cents a kilowatt higher, and we didn't fix the size of the equalization program as we do now, then Quebec's equalization payment would fall by about $4.2 billion this year. And so there are important ways in which how we design the details of the program can have big implications for the allocation of financial resources across the countries. But yeah, just to reemphasize the main point, it's provinces that typically lead that conversation.
That's great insight. Premier, you were right to go to Trevor sooner. Of course you were right. Let's go over here. Oh, other side? Okay. Go ahead.
Thank you. Good evening, Premier Smith and distinguished guests. So, to take your question, does Alberta need to take the lead? Absolutely. So, in very much the same way as Quebec takes the lead on the eastern side of Canada, we are the 2 provinces that probably have the most to gain or lose through this process. So having us at that stake, taking the lead or co-leading it with Quebec, I think helps to direct the conversations in the direction it needs to go. I'm happy to hear about some of the equalization thing, because that was the greatest concern people bring up, is the equalization tables, is it fair? One of the things some of the people, I don't know whether it's a misconception or not, is that Quebec doesn't claim their hydro and their resources because they are not claiming it. And that alone, as mentioned, would change that formula dramatically. I guess I'm out of time.
Yep. Go ahead, sorry.
Sure. No, I think you're absolutely right. And I think one of the things you'll find as we're talking through each of these topics is these are the kind of things Quebec does already. And I think that's why they keep coming up every so often, is saying, is it time for us to take over tax collection, provincial police, pension, immigration. It's because Quebec already does that. And so that's one thing I would say. And I think you are also right. I mean, if we were to have a formula that said, okay, yeah, you can subsidize your electricity, but you can't get the difference from the equalization pod. As Professor Toombs said, that alone would bridge the gap by $4.2 billion, or maybe higher if they're that much under market. But imagine if we did the same thing on resources. You can keep your vast supply of natural gas in the ground, Quebec, but we're going to impute a value of what you would gain in resource revenues if you developed it. And if you choose to keep it in the ground, that's great, but you can't get that differential from the rest of Canada and Alberta in particular. And so if we can start that kind of conversation, and talking about provinces take the lead, Albertans voted 62% to end equalization. And what was really interesting about what happened after that is Newfoundland and Labrador started looking at the program and said, why are we, the most indebted province with one of the lowest populations, why are we transferring money to Ottawa so Ottawa can give it to Ontario and Quebec? It was never designed for small provinces to transfer money to the big, rich, robust economies. And so BC and Saskatchewan joined them in a lawsuit saying that's not fair. We need equivalent per capita transfers. So we already have 4 provinces that are saying we need to make some changes on this. So I think the ball is rolling, and we just have to see what the next stage is.
Promise we'll do a straw poll on each subject before we wrap it.
He might want a response. Sorry, don't mean to over-moderate with you. He and I were both talk show hosts at one point. But just because we've got a smaller audience, we might be able to allow for a follow-up.
I think so. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, that was my question for a follow-up. Is there any way to use Quebec's system against them by using their model as a best practice? And basically, by using that model, it would kind of redistribute the fairness across, because we'd be using the same policies that Quebec is using against them.
Can I pose that question to Michael Binion? And the reason you're looking at me like you're not sure, Michael, but this is what we discussed a little bit earlier. Are you comfortable to chat about some of this?
Sure. Well, it sort of comes up under the constitutional question in a way. But first of all, I want to make the comment, Premier, let's not start any discussions about leaving gas in the ground, please. I don't know. I'm not for that. Okay, let's not talk about using it against Quebec. Let's talk about using it for us. I would start with that, because I think Quebec does some things that are very effective for themselves. And one of them is that they have worked extremely hard to demonstrate the ability to govern themselves, which of course, if you have aspirations of more autonomy or more sovereignty, if you can't actually govern yourself, then you're a little bit like the teenager saying, I'm going to move out of the house, but I don't know how I'm going to pay the rent, I don't have a job, right? So Quebec has really taken the effort to show responsible self-government. And I think that gives them a lot more impact when they talk about if we're not treated fairly within the Confederation, well, we actually are in a position to do something about it, because they've shown they can govern themselves. And I think that's the number one thing Alberta can do, is to prove and demonstrate that we also can govern ourselves.
Premier, I'm going to give you the last word, but I just want to get to one more. And then we got to move to the next subject. So go ahead, sir.
Hello. So in June, 95% of teachers voted in favor of strike action.
Super.
Now we're talking about, no, this ties into the equalization. Please don't cut me off, sir.
Well, you're going to have to get to the subject matter, sir. It is now, but we'll turn it back on.
Well, you should let him see let's see if we can get it connected.
Equalization and transfers, okay?
So the criticism to Quebec was that they were not developing oil and gas, correct? Now, criticism we could do for Alberta's government currently is we're spending hundreds of millions of dollars on bad Tylenol, that we're spending money paying off Australian mining companies to not mine coal, and our own Brian Jean has kind of changed his mind back and forth on that one.
Okay.
Now, we are starting school on Tuesday, and I know you'll claim that the money to pay teachers would come from this equalization. But I look at the argument that Quebec could do better with their resources, with their funding, and could we not also do better, not waste money on Tylenol from Turkey, not waste money on coal, not waste all sorts of money through.
Gotcha. Okay, so not happy with the budget. Thank you. Okay, so we do have.
Do you want me to?
You don't have. You certainly don't have to, Premier. I mean, it's not.
Well, I guess what I would say is that we have been in a situation for the last 10 years where we have disconnected spending from the creation of wealth. You can't just spend money. You have to create it first. You have to do all of the things in an economy that generates jobs, which generate personal income tax revenue, corporate income tax revenue, and royalties. So yeah, that includes doing some mining development. I just saw some of the biggest mines in the country doing an aerial tour. We have 60% of the oil sands is developed through mining. It generates $15 billion a year in resource revenue to us. So yes, we want to continue doing those kinds of things and defending them for the very reason that in doing so, we develop the revenue so that we can pay for all of the things that people care about: healthcare, education, and public services. One more thing I would say, and this is a little factoid that Professor Toom gave to me, is that if we aligned the tax revenue generation with the responsibilities, Alberta and all other provinces would be generating 70% of the tax revenues because the things we do are expensive. Healthcare, education, and social supports are expensive. And yet, we only generate 40% of the tax revenues. Ottawa generates 60, and then they play this transfer game. So one of the things we're talking about, and was in the video, is how do we align our taxation power with our areas of responsibility? How do we do that? Can we initiate a conversation so that we can transfer those tax points? And I think that's a worthwhile conversation to have.
Thank you, Premier. So here's the straw poll. We'll do these after every video and discussion. Should Alberta take a lead role in working with the other provinces to return federal transfers, reform federal transfers and equalization? Who says yay? Who would say nay? The yeas have it. Okay, the next subject will be the Alberta Pension Plan. Here's the video.
Our next topic is creating an Alberta pension plan with the same or better benefits than the Canada Pension Plan. With a younger and more productive workforce, Alberta workers contribute about $3 billion more each year to the Canada Pension Plan than Alberta seniors receive in benefits. Alberta has the constitutional right to exit the CPP. And if we did, federal legislation says that Alberta would be entitled to a sizable share of the CPP assets that we could use to start our own provincial pension plan, so long as we guarantee comparable pension benefits for seniors. Quebec made the decision to start its own pension plan decades ago, and they have an agreement with Ottawa so that all retirees receive their full pension benefits, whether they worked in Quebec, retired there, or some mix of both. Alberta could negotiate a similar arrangement with Ottawa if we created our own pension plan. There are more factors to consider as well. Currently, virtually all investment decisions and management of the CPP is conducted by folks working in Ottawa and Toronto rather than Alberta. While the CPP's mandate is to maximize pension returns, in recent years, the CPP annual reports have shown an increasing focus on emissions reductions and DEI concerns, which do not always result in the highest rate of returns for the pension plan. CPP management has also become bloated and expensive. 20 years ago, the CPP had only 150 employees, with operating costs of $118 million. Today, it has ballooned to more than 2,100 employees, with operating costs of about $6 billion. If Alberta opted to commence its own pension plan, the fund would be managed out of Alberta by Albertans, and investments could be focused exclusively on maximizing returns rather than adjusting for carbon dioxide and DEI-related objectives. With that all said, the CPP has consistently generated healthy returns and is a stable and critical source of income for seniors in Alberta and Canada. So, what are the benefits of Alberta choosing to withdraw from the CPP to create its own pension plan? 1. A big upfront payout. Alberta would get back a significant lump sum by exiting the CPP. The chief actuary in Ottawa has indicated our share would be at least $140 billion. That's plenty to start and build a strong Alberta pension plan from day one. 2, better benefits for seniors, lower premiums for Alberta workers. Thanks to our younger, more productive population, an Alberta pension plan could result in Alberta workers paying lower pension premiums on their paychecks, or seniors enjoying higher pension benefits, or a mix of both. 3, local control and boosting our economy. An Alberta pension plan would be managed right here at home, creating more jobs and growing Alberta's financial sector. We would also be insulated from the economic and demographic decline in Canada. Our investment decisions could also be steered clear of ideological decision-making and instead remain focused on the long-term rate of return for Alberta pensioners. But there are some risks to consider. 1, uncertain payout. The CPP exit rules aren't clear in the federal legislation, and Ottawa is notoriously anti-Alberta with its decisions. So the size of the lump sum Alberta is offered could be lower than it should be. This could result in a lengthy court battle with the federal government, and it could lower our ability to increase benefit payments for seniors or lower premiums for workers. 2, long-term risk. As with any pension plan, if the plan is mismanaged or Alberta's economy and demographics fall behind Canada, premiums would have to rise in the future in order to guarantee our seniors the same benefits they enjoy today under the CPP. Regardless, as with Quebec, Alberta's government would still be able to guarantee that an Alberta pension plan provide the same or better benefits to Alberta seniors as they now enjoy under the CPP. 3, portability concerns. The Quebec pension plan and CPP have an agreement in place to ensure pensioners get the same single pension, regardless of where they worked or lived in Canada during their career. Alberta would expect a similar arrangement with Ottawa, but it is not guaranteed. So, should Alberta withdraw from the CPP and use Alberta's portion of the CPP to create our own Alberta pension plan? Or should we continue with the CPP as we do now?
Okay, let's start on the right side of the room over here, or your left.
Hi, my question would be for the Premier. My name's James Blank. I'm a proud Albertan. I've lived here in Fort McMurray for about 13 years now. Moved here from British Columbia, but I am honestly very proud to call Alberta my home. My question is principally regarding the Alberta pension plan. As the Premier has already pointed out, in the eyes of the government, it's very important that 62% of Albertans responding supported the revisiting of transfer payments within the provinces. However, I'd like to point out that in 2023, 63% of Albertans rejected out of hand the concept of an Alberta pension plan and wanted the pension plan to remain within Canada. So why is the Premier choosing to support Albertans who have expressed their opinion on one topic, and yet here we are
James thinks the issue is
the
settled,
other
Premier,
topic.
so I think that's what he's saying.
Well, what I would say is that this is why sometimes you need to put things to a referendum so that you can see what the true will of the people is. Because what happens when you do an online survey is people who feel really, really strongly about something are the ones who end up showing up to fill out the surveys. That's one of the reasons why we use it as one indicator. And then when you do polls, you're getting maybe 600 or 800 people who respond. When you do a referendum, that really allows for a yes side and a no side to debate it out for over a month and to be able to get the feedback from Albertans as a whole. So what I have said is that if I do not see an indication that Albertans are interested in putting this question to a referendum, then we won't do it. But what I have also seen is that the most recent polling that we did, more people are in favor of an Alberta pension plan than opposed to it, and there's still about a 20 to 25% undecided factor. So I don't really have a good gauge on that. That's part of the reason why we're doing this town hall. It's part of the reason why we're going around the provinces. We want to see if people want us to put it to a referendum in the spring.
Thank you, James. So thanks for the question. Let's go over here now.
There, I want to thank you all for coming up here to Fort McMurray. I want to thank our local MLAs for also showing up, even though they didn't for the past educational worker strike. My question is, poll after poll has shown that the vast majority of Albertans support the Canadian pension plan and want to stay in the plan. Why does your government continue to go against the clear wishes of Albertans and pursue a pension plan that we don't want?
Thank you. So, Premier, I think you just answered that. So we'll just go over to this mic for the next question.
Good evening, Premier and honorable guests. My name is Larissa, and I grew up here in Fort McMurray, and I have parents who are retirement age. My question is, because we've had historically a pretty contentious relationship with Ottawa, so how will you ensure that Ottawa is going to give up this $140 billion of the CPP for Alberta to start its own pension plan?
Well, I can probably get some others on the panel to talk about that, but I guess it's because it's the law. The Constitution gives to the provinces the right to have pensions. The decision was made in the 60s for Alberta to opt into a collective way of managing that. Quebec made a different approach. Quebec decided to set up their pension fund independently. On top of that, there's a statutory, it's ruled by law, what the formula is for determining what happens when a province leaves, what their entitlement is. We have a bit of a dispute with Ottawa about what that number is. I think Professor Toom's methodology was one that they seemed to indicate was one that they would be more open to. But this is the other fact of the matter, is that if we continue on in this plan, then we continue to overpay into the pension. Year after year after year, we're paying $9 billion worth of premiums. Our seniors get $6 billion worth of benefits. So every year, $3 billion per year, year after year after year, compounded, will go to Ottawa for them to determine what the investment approach will be without even asking us what our opinion is on it. And so I think, unfortunately, the federal government could have been more responsive. They could have treated us a little bit more like a stakeholder in this pension, and as a result, maybe made some decisions that might have been a little bit different in how they invested those dollars. But I would say, because it's established in the Constitution and in the statute, I don't know that I've ever seen a federal government that would just say, sorry, we're not going to do that. I don't know that they would have the ability to do that. I would think the courts would force that. But let me turn it over to Trevor, and he can maybe respond.
I think that was a great answer. I'd only add that the law that kind of enumerates what the formula would be that pays out to a province, there's certainly still reasonable disagreement around what some of the interpretation is and the language there. But it's a type of law that Ottawa can't just unilaterally change. It requires 2/3 of the provinces representing 2/3 of the population to agree to change. So they're constrained in a way that's somewhat unique among other federal laws. And so there might, of course, be disagreement around the payout. The video noted that as one of the risks and sources of uncertainty, but that law is on the books right now.
I'm going to save Andrew. I'm going to come to you in a minute, but first I want to get to some more people at the mics. Over here.
Hello again. My question is actually from my wife. She wants to know all the discussions we've heard about the mystery number, what it's going to be. The reports that she's seen show that possibly only about half of what we expect of that 140 is what we can probably get. My question is this: with a potential huge shortfall such as that for this pension plan, what is the government's plan to make up those revenues if this actually happens?
Yeah, quick response there. This gets to the uncertainty around what some of the words in the Act means. And if we dial back the clock 2 years when we began this conversation. There was a number put forward, then a follow-on report that I produced suggesting it might be half of that number, and that's the 140 billion number. So that one is based on kind of the smaller of the two interpretations already. And I think, who knows what the number will be at the end of the day, but we shouldn't think that the previous debate from 2 years ago suggests that half of 140 might be on the table. The 140 is the number that's roughly half of what was put forward initially.
And I'll probably repeat something that Professor Touma said to me before and just look to make sure that I'm not misremembering what he said. You have to remember that the value of the pension that each pensioner receives is fairly modest when you compare it to what we put aside for our public sector pensioners, because people have said, well, why don't you just roll it all into one? And it's because the amount that our public sector pensioners get is quite a bit larger. So you get this impression that the amount the CPP needs to be equally large. And as it turns out, we would be able to give the same premiums and the same payout if they only transferred us $20 billion. So this allows, this would be 7 times the amount to have an equally solvent plan to the CPP, which means that we would not only be able to rebate some of the premiums that seniors overpaid over the years, but we'd also be able to reduce premiums in the long run. Am I summarizing you correctly, Professor?
Yep, that's correct. 20 billion is that number. And
go ahead, sir.
I just want to say thank you for coming. I want to speak as someone who has worked all his life in Alberta. I've lived here all my life and paid into Canada Pension for some 50 years. And the more I read and the more I dig into the truth of the Canada Pension Plan, I would just encourage everybody to do that. It's pathetic and it's gross mismanagement. The way going from 150 employees to 2,100, 10 years, the last 10 years, that pension plan has only produced 8.4% growth. That's pathetic. You expect that in your year. Would any of you keep your same advisor if he only gave you 8.4% for 10 years? So my question is, when can we get out of the CPP and go with an APP?
Okay, just hang on, Will. We'll ask the straw poll, although I think I know where it's going. I just want to make sure. I want to make sure that part of the task here tonight too is I want you to meet everybody on the panel, and still get to as many as you can. So I'm trying to graciously allow everybody to talk and let the Premier's expertise shine through because she's so damn good at all this stuff. But I want to get one more up here.
Yeah, so my question is, you guys keep saying we give more than we get with the pension plan. What's the correlation between the number of people contributing in the province to the number of people receiving? Like, is there what's the ratio look like for that? Another part of that would be, I don't like the way the CPP is run, but given your guys' history of mismanaging money, same with like the MH Care scandal, again, Tylenol, why should we trust you to manage it better?
Okay, that's...
Well, a couple things I'd say. First of all, just have a look at Andrew Coyne's column on this in May. And one of the things that he points out is some of the stats that were raised by the person at the mic, that it went from about $150 million in management expenses to $6 billion in management expenses. And the reason they started off so cheap is they were able to manage it based on index funds. And then they changed to active management. So you would expect that with active management, you're paying a lot more, you should get better returns. It's been the reverse. They actually would have been better if they'd stayed with the cheaper management and put it into passive investment. So one of the things that we did is we hired new management at AIMCO, and we've returned to a lot more conservative investment strategy. One of the first things they did is fire their diversity, equity, and inclusion investment officer so that we could actually put a lens of returns rather than ideology on returns. And we also ended the ESG investment as well, because again, it should be about returns rather than about ideology. So I would say that those two things will return it to where it should be. And just the rough numbers that I gave you, that where we're workers are paying in $9 billion, because remember, that's workers and employers, and our pensioners are receiving $6 billion. That gives you an idea of what the ratio would be. And part of that is that we've got a younger workforce, higher workforce participation rate. So at the current state of the moment, we're upside down on that. We have fewer pensioners than we have those paying in. But Judson might want to weigh in on this too.
Actually, that's exactly where I'm going. Andrew, before I end this.
Oh, yeah, thanks very much, Bruce and Madam Premier. What we're hearing tonight, I think, and it's been reflected on our prior panels, this is a really emotional issue. And I think we heard the one gentleman use the phrase out of hand. I dismiss it out of hand. And that strikes me as an emotional response. People who are voices against changes to CPP, I do think, we'll be focusing on the emotional side of this. But no question, as we've already been hearing tonight, that the math is straightforward. An Alberta pension would be viable and sustainable and successful. That's just the math. The contributions by Alberta participants would fall and benefits would rise. But one of the vignettes I'll share with you, at a prior town hall, a gentleman rose to the microphone and he told us how his father was a federal civil servant in the finance department. And in the 1970s, late 70s, he told his then young son, you're going to have to do your own program because this CPP is going to be bankrupt. And it turned out not to be the case. And the reason largely is Alberta and the energy industry, and specifically the oil sands. We've already bailed this pension out once. And so I want to just convey to people confidence that this is something that we're entirely capable of managing and managing very successfully.
Thank you. Okay, time to get to the question. And the question is, should Alberta create a pension plan with the same or better benefits than the Canadian pension plan? Who says yes? And who says no? I think the yeas have it. Okay, the next video, and that was a great discussion. The next video on the potential for a provincial police force.
Our next topic is the potential creation of an Alberta police service to take over community policing from the RCMP. Today, roughly 80% of Albertans are served by local municipal police services, such as the Calgary, Edmonton, and Lethbridge City Police Services. However, Albertans living in most rural communities and a few mid-sized cities like Red Deer, Fort McMurray, and Airdrie are policed by the RCMP under Alberta's policing contract with Ottawa. And as is the case with most federal agreements, Alberta is getting shortchanged. To be clear, RCMP police officers and staff aren't the problem. They do all they can to protect us with the resources they have. The problem is Ottawa. Because the federal government is failing to provide the number of promised officers and resources to Alberta communities under the policing contract, response times are slow, staffing is stretched thin, and officers are often moved across the country at a moment's notice, resulting in little connection to the Alberta communities they serve. Furthermore, because of French language requirements, English-speaking Alberta officers do not qualify for senior RCMP positions. And ultimately, the RCMP's policing priorities are chosen by the federal government in Ottawa, rather than the provincial government in Alberta. Even the federal government itself has recently stated the RCMP should transition away from contract policing when current agreements expire in 2032. Ontario and Quebec have had provincial services for over 100 years. Why not Alberta? So, what are the benefits of Alberta withdrawing from the federal policing contract and creating our own provincial police service to provide community policing? 1, more local, more accountable. An Alberta police service would be run by and for Albertans, accountable to our province and not to the federal government in Ottawa. Police officers and support staff could build long-term careers in the Alberta communities they know and love. And any current RCMP officers and support staff working in Alberta would be invited to join a new Alberta police service. 2, safer rural communities. With local recruitment and stable placements, rural response times would improve considerably from where they are now, and coverage would become more reliable and tailored to each municipality and region. This is especially important in underserved rural Alberta communities. 3, flexible, made-in-Alberta solution. Most Albertans already have local police services. The province would assist larger communities like Red Deer, Fort McMurray, and Airdrie to transition to their own police services, while smaller, rural communities would be policed by the new provincial police service. And of course, nothing would change for Edmonton, Calgary, and other communities that already have municipal police services in place. But there are also potential drawbacks to consider. 1. Startup costs. Establishing a new police service requires significant initial investment. Hiring officers, buying equipment, building training infrastructure, and training personnel. Ultimately, the startup costs could reach into the hundreds of millions over several years. 2. Loss of some federal operational funding. The federal government currently covers 30% of RCMP contract policing costs. It is therefore likely that there will be additional ongoing operational costs for the province. However, municipalities would not be saddled with those costs. So, should Alberta create an Alberta Police Service to take over community policing from the RCMP?
Got a couple of panelists I know I can go to on this. Premier, just to let you know before you call them, I'll definitely be going to Judge McDonald later. Okay, I'm going to be going to Stephen Buffalo a little bit later, and probably Tara, even you, for some opinion on rural crime. But first, so many people to hear from, so I forget where we left off. Over here?
Go ahead, sir. Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Good evening, Madam Premier and panel, and everyone for coming out tonight. My name is Renee Wells. I am a retired member of the RCMP. I joined in 1979 out of Manitoba, and I came to Alberta in 1980, and I'm proud to call Alberta my home. And over the course of 3 decades, I have to say that I found there are some monumental changes that were going on and challenges that I think in turn challenge Ottawa to be everything to everyone. The one thing I would want to add to your video is more than just Ontario and Quebec. There's also the province of Newfoundland with its Royal Newfoundland Constabulary. I think that's missing from the equation. So we would be the 4th if we moved to our own provincial policing service. But more of a comment than anything else. I truly believe that with the provincial police service contract coming due in 2032, we need to have a plan in case Ottawa realizes that, hey, there are many challenges that they have, and they can't be everything to everyone. So anyway, I wanted to thank you again tonight.
Thank you. And by the way, sir, this probably gives us all a great opportunity to say the following. When this discussion comes up, it's certainly not the fault of any of the RCMP officers and those that have served in the line of duty like yourself. We're all so grateful for all of you. Thank you. It's whether the system or the bureaucracy could serve us better. So, Justice McDonald, do you want to start us on this one? There's a bit of a history here as well.
What a lot of people don't realize is Alberta already had its own provincial police force from 1917 to 1932. Now, there's a bit of a history surrounding that. In 1916, the province had passed the law of prohibition. Now, regardless of your views on prohibition, the RCMP, who are acting as the provincial police of Alberta at that time, were under orders from Ottawa not to enforce it. And the provincial government thought that they should because they were the provincial police. So in any event, matters got a bit heated between Edmonton and Ottawa unilaterally removed all the RCMP officers out of Alberta, ostensibly to help with the war effort in 1916 and 1917. So Alberta was forced on very, very short notice to establish its own Alberta Provincial Police, which it did, and it had difficulties doing that initially, obviously, because they'd been given no forewarning about this. But over the course of the 1920s, the Alberta Provincial Police became a very professional force, and it was well regarded by the citizens of Alberta. Now, unfortunately, in 1932, depths of the Great Depression, the province of Alberta was broke, even been technically bankrupt, and the force had to be disbanded for financial reasons. And then that's when the RCMP got introduced back into it. But, I think we can safely say that Alberta is no longer bankrupt, far from it, and we could very easily have our own provincial police. And I'll make one other comment. At the end of the last town hall meeting we were at, I had a lady come up to me And she lives up somewhere, Lesser Slave Lake, in quite an isolated area. And she'd be in her maybe mid to late 50s. And she was almost in tears because effectively they have no police up there. Again, no disrespect to the RCMP, but there's an officer, one only about 3 hours from where they are. So they're effectively in a lawless area. And it's something that's very upsetting to these people. You know, there's only 20% of the Alberta population that's affected by this problem, but it really affects those 20% a lot.
Thank you, Bruce. And again, thank you, sir, for your service. Let's go to this microphone.
Hello. I'm the proud daughter of a retired RCMP officer. I grew up all over rural Alberta, watching my dad serve with integrity. At the end of the day, policing is another form of social service, as is our pension to some degree. The Alberta government already shows very little aptitude in managing social services, as seen through education and healthcare. What makes them think that they can manage what they already can't manage effectively in our home province? Will this funding, as we've seen through the video, that will be expensive, take funding away from our healthcare and education that is already in desperate need of funding and support?
Thank you for the question, Premier. I think that one's for you or your minister right beside you. One of you.
Well, the unfortunate thing that we've discovered is that the federal government is not living up to its commitment under the contract. We're supposed to have 1,911 officers. At any given time, we only have 1,400 for a variety of reasons, vacancies and what have you. And it's the same story in the rest of the country, that 20 to 30% vacancies across the country. And Mike Ellis has taken, the worst part of it is that they won't even tell us what their detachment strength is. So Mike Ellis has had to take to going to each detachment to find out what the bench strength is versus what we're entitled to. He told me one detachment in Northern Alberta that was supposed to have a complement of 23 officers, it only has 5. So when you look at that, if you wonder what is taking so long, why can't I get police response? That's the reason, is they're just not living up to their commitment. So Grande Prairie, they did the math on it. They looked at their complement of officers, what it was costing. They realized that they could either save some money by going to a local force, or they could increase their complement, and that's what they're doing. So they are moving over 5 years. I think their first hiring happens in 2026. They will go from having 55 officers to 110. And when they went out to call for resumes, they got 200 people who responded. So I would say we have a great history in the province of having municipal governments take the lead. Calgary, Edmonton, Medicine Hat, Lethbridge, Grande Prairie, Taber, Lacombe, and a couple of others. We've got 7 Indigenous police forces as well. That's likely what will happen, is that most of the larger municipalities will go for a municipal police force. And then we have an incredible team of sheriffs that have been filling the gap. They do SCAN, which is shutting down drug houses. They do surveillance to be able to get drug trafficking busted. We had to deploy them at the border to do border patrol because the RCMP is not located in southern Alberta. And we also have them doing fugitive apprehension, and they've caught thousands of bad guys. So I would say that our sheriffs have demonstrated that they're doing the policing, and we're going to make sure they have the status to continue doing it.
Please pass along our sincere thanks to your father, though, and thank you for coming and asking a great question. Tara, can I ask you, you hit the doors recently, or recently elected MLA. What were things at the doors like? Did anybody talk to you about rural crime? What do you hear about in your constituency?
Yeah, I heard about it a lot, actually. I hit a door with a retired RCMP officer. I will reiterate to those in the room, thank you for your service. And he had same sentiment as the first gentleman. He felt quite strongly that it's something that was needed because they aren't, able to resource the way we need them. I hit the door of actually an active Calgary police officer who lives in a rural town, and again, he said, man, that's like, he strongly agreed that we needed it. Now, I can tell you as someone who lives on a farm and has been the victim of rural crime, where it is not a disparagement, but to call and they won't get there in time. The fact that I was chasing him in my vehicle to tell him where to go didn't seem to help. Maybe I shouldn't say that. But
oh, no, the Premier said something worse last week. You can,
well, I won't say what was in the truck behind me then. But the point is, we have a problem in rural because it is a large area. We're already very much, isolated, we do need more. But I will say the people I hit on the doors and the fact that that's just 2 that I hit that happened to be within that, they agreed with it.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. Police presence matters so much. I hear Mike Ellis say that all the time. Let's go to this line.
Hello, Premier, and all of the representatives of the panel. My name is Phyllis Petura, and I grew up in rural northern Alberta and now reside here in Fort McMurray. And I guess one of my concerns is we're saying that maybe this rural police force will fall on the municipalities. How are we paying for that, being one of the communities with a very high tax base, as it is already for our municipal government? And then also, how do you propose that the catch and release issue that we have with our current legislation, if we're operating under Ottawa's policies for how we're treating criminals or people that are doing these actions, robbing us, etc., how are we approaching that? Because it's not just policing, it's the next level after policing. It's great they get slapped on the hands, but they're back on the street tomorrow.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Thank you. Premier, I know you can take that one. I know Minister Schultz could, whatever you prefer.
Well, I can tell you that Mike has talked to a lot of rural municipalities, and they already do pay a certain amount of money towards policing. One community in particular, he told me that they were spending $2 million on policing, and they only had 2 or 3 officers. He said, for $2 million, I could get you 15 police officers. So I think that's the analysis that we're asking municipalities to do, is what are you currently paying? Compare that with the kind of service you're getting, and would that be enough? Would you be able to get more policing and more local policing as a result of that? And a lot of the value proposition for many of these communities is yes, and that's part of the reason why I think we've got about 15 different municipalities that have gone down this pathway, and 2 that have asked us to set up sheriff's detachments, and we may end up seeing more. When it comes to catch and release, this is another example of where all of the premiers have spoken with one voice on the need to change these policies. The consideration should be whether some violent criminal is likely to reoffend. I know that in the sentencing, and maybe the judge can talk about that, in the sentencing, you have to look at other factors, but the number of people who have been let out and then they go on to commit another crime. In the case of Doug, Doug Ford, when he first started advocating very strongly on this, it was somebody who got released and then went and killed a police officer. And then Wabkanu in Manitoba, a very similar circumstance. Somebody was released and they went and they ended up targeting either family members or their community. So we have asked the Prime Minister to close this loophole, that if somebody is violent, they have to be kept behind bars until it gets before a judge and they figure out what an appropriate sentence would be. And so we'll be seeing whether or not that happens in the fall, but that's what we're all advocating for.
Okay. I want to get to a couple more. Go ahead.
Hello. I just wanted to ask, maybe for a response, but the commissioner for the RCMP, Mike Dunham, sent you a letter a couple weeks back, and I just wanted to get your response to that as far as the comments in the video about French promotions, the province and their policing initiatives and not having control of that. He made some pretty strong comments that they're still invested in contract policing, even past the 2032 mark. So I just wanted to hear a response from his comments and his letter to you.
Well, I would say that it's unclear, because the last thing that the former Prime Minister did before he left office was to release a white paper saying that they want to get out of contract policing and they want to have the RCMP operate more like the FBI. So I don't know what this new Prime Minister believes, but that was the very last action of Justin Trudeau when he left office, and that has been the indication that they've been giving us behind the scenes for quite some time, that they don't want to do contract policing anymore. Secondly, it's just not true. There is a bilingualism requirement. You can look at the CBC stories on it. You cannot get promotions to senior positions unless you're bilingual, and that also applies to the civil service. It just is the case. Okay, then I guess the CBC is wrong as well. I don't know. Like we know the experience of people about trying to get up the ladder, and we also know what the reporting has been on it. So it just happens to be the case. And I guess on top of that, I would say that when I look at I'll give you an example. Like when we need to have basic information and intel on, and I've asked many times for this, we know that there's 4,000 organized criminals, different crime gangs operating in Canada on fentanyl. That has been released at the federal level. It has been in federal documents. The Americans know this. And so when I say, do we have this particular gang operating here? They say, we can't tell you. So that is not a police force that responds to me. If they can't tell me if certain criminal gangs are operating in here so that we can develop strategies to the communities that they're targeting, that is a major disconnect. And so that's part of the frustration that we've had. And there's several other examples I can give, but that's part of the reason I would say, very much like what the judge said, that they respond through their chain of command to Ottawa. They don't respond to the chain of command to Alberta.
Something else I want to consider on this topic, First Nations policing. Stephen, can you give us some context from some of those communities?
Sure, thanks, Bruce. Yeah, there's a couple that are very vocal and very visual. You know, I'm from Calgary, and the Tsuut'ina Nation has started their own police force. And as well, the biggest reserve in Canada is the Blood Tribe, just outside of Lethbridge, and they have their own police force. You know, and in going forward, I think it's the initiative of the First Nation, not only to have the financial resources, but also the human resources to do their own policing. But, you know, I think it's definitely something that we all have to consider.
Seems like a great time to remind everybody. Thank you, Stephen. Seems like a great time to remind everybody, if you still had a question on policing, it's okay. We've got a half an hour at the end. If you didn't get to your question on the topic, you can come on up. You can come on back up then. And of course, if your question is concerned with Alberta Next and the relationship with Ottawa and it didn't fit into these 6, you can ask it then as well. So the question is, should Alberta create an Alberta Police Service to take over community policing from the RCMP? Who says yes? Who says no? The yeas have it. The no's might be a little more vocal, some of you, but I think the yeas have it. All right, next on constitutional changes, here's the video.
Our next topic is Alberta taking a lead role in working with other provinces to pressure the federal government to amend the Canadian Constitution to empower and better protect provincial rights. The Canadian Constitution, including its Charter of Rights of Freedoms and sections on the division of powers between the federal and provincial governments, is foundational to our democracy. The enforcement of the Constitution by governments and the courts ensures our rights and freedoms are protected, and that our provincial and federal governments generally function as they should. But no document is perfect. Some things that made sense 150 years ago may no longer make sense today. That is why the Constitution contains an amending formula that permits the Constitution to be altered should enough provinces and the federal government agree to it. Over the last decades, several outdated and unfair problems with the Constitution have been identified, but no tangible progress has been made to fix them, due primarily to a lack of federal and provincial leadership. Examples of proposed constitutional reforms include the following. 1. Amending the division of powers to indicate that core areas of provincial jurisdiction, including over natural resources and health, are immune from federal legislation, and to also ensure that in shared areas of jurisdiction, such as agriculture and immigration, provincial laws prevail over federal ones. 2. Imposing constitutional limits on the federal spending power in areas of provincial jurisdiction, including a provincial right to opt out of federal spending measures with proper compensation should they so choose. 3. Adhering strictly to representation by population in the House of Commons. Right now, those living in smaller provinces are greatly overrepresented when compared to those living in larger ones. 4. Either abolishing the Senate entirely or having it actually represent provincial interests as originally intended by mandating an elected Senate with the same amount of senators representing each province. 5. Allowing provinces to appoint their own King's Bench and Court of Appeal justices, rather than having those appointments made by the federal government. 6. Expanding the Supreme Court to allow for more justices from Western Canada and making prior service on a province's Court of Appeal a mandatory requirement of becoming a Supreme Court justice. 7. Eliminating the Ottawa residency requirement for judges on federal courts to ensure more Western Canadian representation. And 8, mandating provincial approval of the appointment of a lieutenant governor to a province by the federal government. There are, of course, many other potential constitutional amendments that are worth discussion, but this is a start. So, should Alberta take a lead role in working with other provinces to pressure the federal government to amend the Canadian Constitution in order to empower and better protect provincial rights? And if so, which of the amendments discussed or other proposals should the Alberta government advocate for?
Okay, Michael, Bruce, Brandon, Glenn, be ready. We'll call on you at some point here. But first, let's get to some of the microphones, and we'll start over here.
Hi there, and back to the mic. Y'all probably know who Bruce Party is, right? And he basically says the amendment to the Canadian Constitution is a pipe dream. It's not going to happen. There's just way too many self-interested parties, whether it's the provinces or special interest groups. It's not going to happen. It's a pipe dream. So I guess that's my comment. I don't think this question, is it a real question? It's not going to happen. So,
well,
maybe just go from there and get some comments on that.
Let's ask Michael Binion to start this one.
Okay, I know Bruce Party, and he is an incredible sophist, and he's an entertaining guy to watch in a debate. But he's wrong on this point. The Canadian Constitution has changed in fairly material ways about every generation or two, and I've just got a paper in for peer review with Macdonald-Laurier on responsible government and how it's been a doctrine of our Constitution that has guided change for some time. And if you just think, how did Canada become independent from England, London, England? It was over a process of demonstrating the idea that we could govern ourselves better locally, and that London was too far away to be responsive. And as Canada showed over time, starting really with the Durham Report, where after the rebellions, where he established and articulated this principle of if Canada demonstrating local responsible government should be given more authority, to the BNA Act, to the provinces in 1905, to the resources being transferred, to the Statute of Westminster in 1931, which Canada finally laws became superior to England's laws, the patriation of the Constitution. It's not impossible to change the Canadian Constitution. It's actually been our tradition for 200 plus years, and it's how Canada became more sovereign and ultimately independent, and there's absolutely no reason why any province like Quebec has demonstrated its own ability to govern itself, that if Alberta can start to satisfy some of the questioners here tonight that we could also govern ourselves, I don't think there's any reason why we shouldn't see constitutional change that allows a devolution of powers closer to the people who are more responsive to the people.
Okay, thank you, Michael. Go ahead.
Bruce, I think Bruce wants to weigh in.
Yeah, I want to just make this comment. I have a lot of respect for Professor Party, by the way, and I really do. But I don't think it's impossible. The general amending section of Section 38 provides for a constitutional amendment to pass if 7 of the provinces that have a population of 50% or more of all the provinces apply for that and get it on to Ottawa. Now, there are certain things I can see potentially all the provinces wanting. The first is the ability to appoint their senior judges, that is, the Section 96 judges in their province. That's the Court of Appeal judges and the Superior Court judges. One of the anomalies of our Constitution is that although the provinces have the responsibility for maintaining those courts, it's Ottawa that appoints them. But I would think if Alberta led the charge on that, we'd probably have all the provinces saying, yeah, that's a good idea. Why shouldn't we have the right to appoint our own, courts, a Court of Appeal justices and trial justices? Another one that might also fly, even though that would require unanimity, is the office of the Lieutenant Governor. Currently, that is appointed by Ottawa, but that person rather. But I could see all the provinces saying, yeah, you know what? Maybe we should. It's the Queen's representative in our province. Maybe there should be a constitutional amendment on that too. So there's some very specific ones that I would say with respect to Professor Party, where there's a will, there's a way. I can see, and those are just a couple, and I'm not going to get into it any further, but those are 2 that really stand out to me as ones that are very, very feasible.
Excellent. Okay, over here.
Hello.
Sorry. My name is Nancy Critchley. I'm a cultural anthropologist. I'm originally a Newfoundlander, but I'm now a proud Albertan. I think when it comes to the Constitution, that the only thing the Alberta government should be worried about is the Clarity Act, which is the act that allows us to descend from Canada and to become an independent nation unto ourselves. Wasting our time with any other constitutional amendments when it comes to all the rest of Canada, we know from a history. They stole Newfoundland in 1949 based on all this. And I just think that as Albertans, we should be worried about spending our money on the only act in the Constitution that's important for us right now, and that's the Clarity Act.
Thank you. Up here. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Hi, my name's Carly Matthews. I'm born and raised Fort McMurrayan. I can appreciate some of the comments around some of the constitutional amendments to judges and things like that, but I certainly wouldn't want any part of this government leading the charge to do with our health care. Quite frankly, some of the decisions that have been made lately by this government call to question their ability to be qualified to lead anything. The fact that we're going to have to pay for our own COVID vaccines, $400 for my family coming up right before Christmas, I don't like that. The MHCare scandal, I don't like anything to do with that. So to put the answer to this question, in my opinion, is absolutely not.
Okay. Not in favor of tackling constitutional changes. I wonder from an MLA perspective, how Glenn, Brandon, maybe Brandon, I'll start with you. You're closer, then we'll go to Glenn. What are your thoughts?
Sure, thanks, Bruce. I could go year by year like Michael did with all the days. Since he already did it, I'm not going to go over that again, but it's a great history to learn. Look, when I think of this issue, I think of a lot of the problems that got us here at this table stem from the division of powers in the Constitution. If you look at Bill C-69, if you look at the emissions cap, you look at these clean energy regulations. So these are real world issues today that if we had more clarity or some constitutional changes, we wouldn't have to address these issues. The Premier mentioned, I think it was 15 lawsuits, where at the heart of those lawsuits, we have a federal government who is frankly ignoring or best case misinterpreting the Constitution. So these are the types of issues where if we can get some clarity, we can get some agreement with the other provinces, it will allow Alberta to be able to enjoy more economic prosperity. It'll allow Alberta to exercise its constitutional rights. And if we can define and clarify those a little better, then we can talk about how we can continue to grow the economic potential of Alberta. But it really does start with this issue. So I think this is a really important conversation to have.
Excellent. MLA Van Dyken, do you want to jump in on top of Brandon here and raise a comment?
Yeah, I'll try to be brief. One thing that I know most of my constituents are very keen on being independent family members and that they're able to be independent members of their communities. And I think that the conversation we need to have with regards to our provincial-federal relationship is largely about ensuring that the principles of subsidiarity, I believe that principle was developed in the Constitution, that the local organization that's closest to the concern is the form of governance over the issues. And that's largely why we see most of the social benefit issues, education, health, and services at that level controlled at the provincial level. But what we've seen over the last number of years, over the last number of decades, is where we see a federal government that sticks more and more of their ideas and their want to control some of those areas, where it mixes. I think it takes away from what the provinces were meant to be at the start of this federation. And I would like to see that we take a lead. I think it's important that provinces recognize their role in the Constitution and that we all take a lead in the direction that we as individual provinces need to for our constituents.
Thank you, MLA Van Dyken. This microphone.
Hello, my name is Lincoln, and I'm a 16-year-old living here in Fort Mac. I was born here, I was raised here, I've been here my whole life. So you talk about constitutional amendments to certain things like having a bigger provincial role in healthcare and such, because currently any federal judgment overrides what the provinces think, correct? So my main issue with this problem is certain protections that the federal government applies for vulnerable peoples that would not be fully guaranteed. Like, for example, I live with autism and that kind of thing. I know a lot of trans people. And I'm just wondering that you, as would be running the health system and your people, could you reasonably, without obviously putting things like parental rights and stuff, would you be able to protect that kind of thing?
Yeah. Thank you, Lincoln. Lincoln, thank you for the question. Thank you for coming to the microphone. Premier, do you want to tackle Lincoln's question?
Well, just a couple of things. We do run the healthcare system. We spend $29 billion on healthcare each year. We've been trying to get the federal government to cost share on us with the original intention, because this is the problem with the feds, is that they come in with grand aspirations, grand promises, and then over a period of time they say, well, we're going to tell you how to run the system and we want you to run it this way, but we're not going to keep on giving you the money for it. So we were trying to get them up to a point, again, where they were cost sharing 50-50, because if you want 50% of the decision-making power, you should put in 50% of the money. So $29 billion we spend on healthcare, and the federal government gives us 8.6. So you can do the math on that. That is a smaller portion than we need, especially since this is an area that continues to grow. People can be mad about our change on vaccines, but that's a prime example. The federal government funded it for 3 years and then defunded it out of the blue. They told us, we're not going to pay for this anymore. And the way they were doing it was costing $135 million a year. So we had to look at our own vaccine policy, and we don't pay 100% of the cost of 100% of the vaccines for 100% of people. We try to target it to those who need it most. But that is just, I think, another example of when the federal government uses its spending power, they often come in with only a tiny portion of what it's going to cost to deliver a program, put the rest of the obligation on Alberta taxpayers, but then they take the lion's share of the money and don't transfer it back to us. That's the problem that we have. I mean, I'm happy to work collaboratively with the federal government on these areas, but we haven't seen that they've been an equal partner in a lot of these areas either.
Thank you, Premier, and thank you, Lincoln, for the question. Over to this mic.
Yeah, thank you so much. My name is Greg. I've been in this Fort Mac for 13 years. And my question is, I agree with that Alberta should take a lead on constitutional change, because I would say Fort Mac has been the most cheated, city in the entire Canada. And that is terrible.
All for constitutional changes. Over here. Back to the other side, sorry.
Hello. I was just wondering, with the unequal representation in the government between the eastern and western provinces, why would the eastern provinces want to work with Alberta to reduce their own representation and give us more representation?
Boy, that's a good question. And there's like 10 of you that could answer that. So whoever's first will be like Family Feud. Hit the buzzer and go.
Let me just give you a story so that you can see that the issue really is it's the federal politicians that probably don't want to change it. In particular, the ones who are benefiting from the system that we have right now. Because I was having this conversation with the Nova Scotia Premier. I was saying, don't you understand why we're so upset about the Senate distribution? Tim, you've got like 1 million people in your province. We've got 5 million people in our province. You have 10 Senate seats, and we have 6 Senate seats. Can you see why that's a problem? He said, oh, I didn't know we had 10 Senate seats. Like, that's how disconnected that federal chamber is from the day-to-day decision-making of the premiers. If you think that the premiers spend a whole lot of time thinking about what's happening in the Senate, they don't, because we have no control over who gets appointed there. That's a total federal decision. So that becomes an act of will by the federal government. And that's why I'm saying is that I think that if we can find some areas of common ground with the fellow premiers, then we might be able to make some of these changes. I might leave it to somebody else to talk about the House of Commons representation.
Okay, we've got a couple of videos left and some time at the end we want to save as well. So let's get to the question. Should Alberta take a lead role in working with other provinces to pressure the feds to amend the Canadian Constitution to empower and better protect provincial rights? Yay. Nay. Pretty consistent. Okay, so let's go to the next video on immigration reform.
Our next topic is Alberta taking more control of the immigration system to counter Ottawa's open border policies, which are driving up the cost of living and are not aligned with the needs of Alberta's economy. In just over 100 years, Alberta's population has grown from a few 100,000 farmers, ranchers, and First Nations peoples to a province of over 5 million, with one of the most prosperous economies in the world. This great success story would not have been possible without new Albertans moving here from all over the world. That is why Alberta has always welcomed newcomers looking to contribute to our province's economic success and unique culture. And we always will. However, as all Canadians intuitively understand, the number of newcomers entering the country each year needs to be sustainable, and everyone wanting to come should be committed to upholding the Canadian values of hard work, love of freedom, and peaceful coexistence. Sadly, Justin Trudeau's Liberals upended Canada's immigration system for over a decade by instituting an open borders policy that permitted millions to enter Canada each year, often without any sort of proper vetting, job prospects, or needed employment skills. The results have been disastrous. Housing prices have skyrocketed. Unemployment keeps increasing as immigration outpaces job growth. And sadly, many of the divisions and disputes that plague other countries have begun making their way into ours. Further, Ottawa has ignored the request of Alberta to cut refugee claimants and student visas, and instead permit Alberta, like Quebec, to select a more sustainable and targeted number of economic migrants better able to contribute to our province's economy. What can Alberta do about the situation? Quite a bit, actually. You see, under the Constitution, immigration is a shared area of responsibility between the federal and provincial governments, which makes sense. Essentially, the federal government gets to decide who they let into Canada, but it's up to the provinces to provide the vast majority of the social programs that newcomers need. So obviously, we should have a say about who is coming here. If Alberta isn't satisfied with the number or economic qualifications of newcomers moving to our province, we may have the option to withhold provincial social programs to any non-citizen or non-permanent resident who does not have an Alberta-approved immigration status. This would likely encourage more sustainable numbers of immigration overall, while supporting the entry of newcomers that can contribute to our provincial economy. If Alberta went this direction, Ottawa could decide to fight Alberta on this issue in the courts, and there would be some additional costs in taking a more hands-on approach to immigration. However, much, if not all of that cost, could be offset in corresponding savings to our social programs. So, should Alberta take more control of the immigration system in this way, or continue with the status quo? And how can our province convince Ottawa to act more responsibly with their immigration policies in the future?
We're in the unique position, folks, on the panel. We have 3 members of a panel who are first-generation Canadians, first-generation Albertans, and they just have tremendous stories. They're all a little bit different, but it gives us great context on what immigration is like today and what immigration is like was like when they came to Canada. And so I want to hear from these panelists so that you have some context and also take your questions, obviously. But not to put you on the spot, but Dr. Benny Zhu, would you kick us off and tell people, what brought you here and when, and what it was like then, what it was like now?
Thank you, Bruce. Sure. Let me give you my story a little bit. So I came from a family rooted in the practice of traditional Chinese medicine, like acupuncture, 33 years ago. So my father took me over here in search for a better future. So we're kind of fortunate and really appreciate and are grateful to Canada and Alberta to accept us as a newcomer and give us a chance to learn and make us feel like we belong here, and in turn we contribute back. 33 years ago, acupuncture was literally unknown with Chinese medicine, to Alberta. 33 years later, it's a regulated profession under the Health Professions Act. So to me, that's a great change. However, immigration too has changed over the 33 years I've been here. It's like it used to be like a two-way street. We help newcomers to settle in, and the newcomers eventually going to contribute to our growth and to our economy. So today, I can see under the federal open immigration policy, we're facing more challenges. More often employers cannot find the type of employees they're looking for, and the newcomers doesn't have the talents or skills meets their job requirements. So I always believe that when it comes to immigration, one truth should never change, which is the needs and talents must match, and that therefore everybody wins. So that's my story, Bruce.
Thank you. Thank you. We'll hear from Dr. Aiken and Samita as well, but first, a couple of questions or comments. Sorry, go ahead. Other side. Okay. I should put my glasses back on? Is that what you're telling me? Okay, let's go over here.
Yeah, thank you once more. My name is Greg, and I want to thank the government for the good immigration system. I'm a benefactor, and I would proudly say that Alberta should take more control. Thank you.
Hey, Greg, before you go, sir, can you tell us a bit about your story? Tell us a bit about your story.
My story?
Yeah, coming here and, how did it go for you?
I landed in 2004, right in Ontario, and I moved from Ontario in 2011 to Alberta, and I call Alberta home because it's more, I feel the pain. I can easily relate to the Alberta system.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for coming. Premier, do you want to talk about that? Because a lot of people ask, why don't you just reform immigration? Why don't you do something differently?
Well, I can tell you, and I'm going to rely on Professor Toom, who gave me some great stats, just to put it into context. Between 2009 and 2019, Canada welcomed about 0.6% of the population as newcomers. That was sort of the ratio. Worked out to about 275,000 a year. Last year, it was 1.8 million. So I just want you to sort of think about how things have changed from having a level of newcomers that could be attached to jobs, be able to get a home, be able to get rent, be able to move onto a pathway to permanent migration and ultimately citizenship to 1.8 million. We think that we can handle in our economy probably about a 1% number in our population each year. We're 5 million now. That would be about 50,000 people a year. We ended up receiving about 450,000 over the last 3 years. So if you're seeing in some of the discussion in some of the big cities, especially down south, about some of these pressures, that's part of the reason why it's there. We think that with Quebec, as I understand it, they get to choose about 55% of the migrants, economic migrants who come to their country, because they choose on the basis of language. We had about 9,700 we were able to choose, and it ended up being cut in half down to 4,800. And now we're just slowly but surely trying to increase it again. So if you put those numbers out there, we think that we could probably manage about 50,000 newcomers a year. We think probably about 65% of them should be economic migrants. That would be us choosing about 35,000 a year. And I think that is probably not only sustainable, but then it also allows us to find that pathway to attach a person to a job. If it does work out for them, they stay and they have a pathway to become a permanent citizen. That's what we're talking about, is returning to more of a normal level of of immigration in the country, and Alberta taking a lead like Quebec does.
Okay, I get a follow-up question. So do you talk to the other premiers about that? Are they on side? And what does the Prime Minister say about that?
Every premier is on side with that, because if you think about the perfect... personally, I think kind of the perfect model for that economic stream is let's get an employer to find an employee that will fit into their business, has the skills, and then if that employee wants to just stay for a year and then go back home, fine. But if they think that they want to build a life here, now you can find a pathway for them to become a permanent resident, and that becomes the pathway to citizenship. So every single premier has asked, as soon as they unilaterally cut everybody in half last year, every single premier has asked for more. And the immigration minister initially said, no way, no how. And then the prime minister stepped in and said, actually, we've got to adjust that. So I think Alberta's new allocation is going to be another 1,200 or so more, but you can see it falls far short of what we think we need to be able to identify the needs in our economy and be able to attract those citizens. Still to come, Dr. Aiken and Samita, but let's go over here.
Hello. Other than the Indigenous population, Canada is built from immigrants. My grandparents, their first language was Scottish Gaelic. They didn't learn English till they were about 5 or 6 years old. And my grandfather worked together with he was a big fan of Alberta, a staunch conservative, and for 10 years he sent his produce and dairy, he had a 400-acre farm, he sent it to Alberta during the Depression and Dust Bowl era, and which was very difficult for him with 12 kids. And I just have a question. I wonder what someone on the panel may have an opinion about with how do we deal with religious extremists as immigrants in Alberta?
I'm not. Do you know who Samita might have an answer? Samita's my co-chair of the Multiculturalism Council. We have lots of conversations about this.
Fair. Samita, you can handle any question.
Thank you, Premier. Well, we don't deal with them. We let them blend into the Canadian society. That's what they came here to do in the first place. They came for economic empowerment. And that is something which is a given, that we blend into society and not live in our own silos that we left in the first place.
Samita, carry on. Your story, please.
Okay. Thanks, Bruce. For all of us immigrants, Alberta isn't just a place on the map. It's our home. It's where my family arrived 30 years ago, full of hope, ready to build a life. We found a good job. We found a home we could afford. And we found a safe, welcoming community to raise our child. That's the Alberta we came to know and love, a place that offered not just opportunity, but a sense of belonging. Now, more and more people are coming here, drawn by the same hopes that brought so many of us. And that's something to be proud of, truly it is. But it also means we need to be a little thoughtful, because the very things that make Alberta special, our schools, our neighborhoods, our job opportunities, are starting to feel the strain. This isn't about pointing fingers. It's about finding balance. Growth is a good thing, but only when it's guided by care, by planning, and by a commitment to protecting the quality of life we all deserve. And it's up to all of us, ladies and gentlemen, to make sure that promise endures.
Thank you. So well said. I see we got a few in the line. Go ahead.
So my question is, depending on the program at the U of A, this is where I'm getting my statistics from, approximately during a 4-year term, international students pay over $142,000. And 30% of these students at the U of A are international students. So do you have anything in the budget or any plans in the future to see how you will fix this detriment that will happen if these students have their student visas cut?
So the question is, the funding will go down if we reduce the number of foreign students, and how do we intend to make up for that shortfall?
Yes, especially since right now, education has such a low budget.
Yep. Okay. Sure.
Let me jump in, and I'm sure that Professor Toom will be able to weigh in as well. Surprisingly, when the federal government came in with its restrictions on international students, they gave a quota to each province about how many international students they were allowed to approve. We were already below our quota. We already received fewer international students than the rest of the country. This is why, as they've really clamped down, you haven't seen the kind of layoffs that you've seen in Ontario. Ontario's been very dramatic, the number of layoffs that we've seen as a result of losing those international students. McGill is in grave, grave trouble. But I do talk to those who are within faculties at different universities and colleges, and what they tell me is because we were never all over-reliant on international students, it's not having the same kind of effect. There may be others on the panel who can tell you a little bit more on that, but let me throw it over to Trevor Tombe.
So that's pretty well said. I mean, I don't want to speak for any university, certainly not the University of Calgary here, but that's right. The number of international students that we had were under the quota. So we have seen drops in applications that affects the quality of students that are brought into different programs, but it hasn't at all been the kind of financial hit that we've seen elsewhere in the country.
Okay, great. Terrific. Thank you for the question. And let's just stay over there because the line's a little longer. Go ahead. Who's next?
Hi, it's me, Phyllis, again. I'm just curious about with more control over the immigration system to counter Ottawa's open border policies, how are we picking people who are educated to our standard? And we see this on a provincial level when somebody that is, say, a nurse coming from out east, coming to Alberta, they need to redo part of their education. If we're a paramedic trying to move to BC, we have to redo our education. You have to have 4 years of massage therapy to operate in BC, 2 over here. And we want to bring these immigrants in with their skills, but we won't recognize somebody with 8 years of Ukrainian tax system knowledge that does also an international level tax stuff. So how are we policing that, I guess? How are you guys going to manage that?
Phyllis, we've had a million conversations about it. Premier, I know there's even a bill that's been passed.
Well, and there's another one there's two ways we're addressing that. One is all the premiers are working together to mutually recognize each other's credentials from each province. So you should be able to get trained in BC or New Brunswick and move here and vice versa. So that was one of the big objectives that we had on July 1st. But the second part of that is, and we're following the lead from Doug Ford in Ontario, they had a requirement of 3 years of Canadian work experience in order to be able to work in your area of profession. Well, how are you going to do that? How are you going to be able to work in your profession if you can't get the job because because you don't have the work experience? So they eliminated that. And what they allow for is somebody in a trained profession to be supervised and work. And if there are any additional training that they need, they get it while they're working. So it's seamless. And so, again, those are things that we already can do and probably already should have done. But when it comes to how do you choose the newcomer? We would like that to be, and maybe I should get Adam Legg to weigh in on this, we would like that to be led by the business community. If the business community has somebody on their staff and they say, hey, you know what, I came from this community, wherever it would be, I know that my brother, sister, uncle, cousin has the same credentials, I can vouch for them, why don't we bring them over, get them trained up? I think that's normally how people end up finding a job, is through that kind of network, but that really should be led by the business community, and that will ensure that it's fair, because we have a massive diaspora in Alberta. I think we have got every cultural and linguistic and national group represented here by those who have arrived. And so I think that is probably the way that we'd be able to do it. But I'd love to hear Adam's response.
Yeah, thanks, Premier. The business community would ideally love to see exactly that kind of scenario where they could identify the needs that they have and then work to target collaboratively with government, immigrants in other countries to fulfill those needs. The challenge is that the federal immigration system scoring approach has been changed so dramatically over the years. The joke that we like to say is that a PhD in Latin will get a higher score than a heavy-duty mechanic. Now, I know in this community there's a huge demand for heavy-duty mechanics. Not sure there's a big demand for PhDs in Latin. But there's a need to reform the scoring system so that we could achieve that kind of outcome. There's a need to restore greater provincial decision-making in that through the provincial nominee program, which the Premier has alluded to the fact that the federal government has cut. And I can tell you my peers and across the country are working with their premiers to try and have that restored at the federal level so that provinces can work with the business community to identify the specific needs in their communities and in their regions, that are different, and to work with the business community to target those people internationally that have the skills, bring them over. To the point earlier on recognition, there's so much that the accrediting bodies who do require all of the credential re-examinations and those sorts of things could be working with people in their original home countries, getting some of that equivalency built before they even land, so that when they land, they are ready to work in the fields in which they're skilled and educated to do so. But that is not the system the federal government has set up right now.
Let me just add one more, because I'm watching this in my home riding of Brooks Medicine Hat, because we've got JBS there, which is the big slaughterhouse down there. I believe they have now 4,000 employees. And I think they began by recruiting people from Sudan, and then Somalia, then Mexico, Philippines, Colombia. I think the most recent individuals I met were from Ecuador. And so I don't know how JBS manages to find them and use our program, but they are responsible for a massive population boom in Brooks because they are the principal employer, and they are reaching out throughout the world and through their networks to be able to do it. And I think that that's a very positive example of how more businesses would do the same.
Boy, Phyllis, you really got a good answer on that one. In fact, you took us over time, so we're going to make a moderator's choice and extend this topic by a couple of minutes. Let's go over here.
Hello, Byron Kessler, Native heritage, can trace back to 1775. Alexander Burston married a Native Cree woman named Nancy. That's all I know. Thank you for being here on immigration. I see this as a flip side to that topic, what nobody has mentioned, is the declining birth rate. Our immigrants, God bless them for coming here and helping us out. The first generation, usually like we were 20, 30, 40 years ago, big families. Second generation, not so much. Third generation or whatever, somewhere along in there, they turn out to be just like us. I want my big truck, my car, and I don't have any kids and no expensive because they're expensive. How do you put money back in the people's pockets so that the immigrants are here, they're having more kids, they can afford those kids? Mm-hmm. I'm not saying don't have immigrants come in. We need some of these expertise. I don't know how many nuclear physicists are in the room, and if we have a nuclear plant come in, we need someone to come in and teach us how to run that. I understand that. But
terrific.
How do we put money back into the people so that they can afford to increase this birth rate?
Thank you for the question. Dr. Aiken, can I get you to give a little context, please?
Hello, hi, my name is Dr. Aiken. I'm a family doc and I work out of rural Alberta. And when I moved to Canada about 10 years ago with my family, I had a job and they'd been looking for someone to work in that particular area, couldn't find anyone. And I said, sign me on. I'm brave enough to come work in Alberta. And that's the beauty of Alberta. Alberta gives opportunity for economic migrants. If you're someone who wants to work hard, you want to build a life for yourself, you want to build a wonderful experience for yourself, this is the place to come. And I'm always grateful that I'm in the province of Alberta. And what I've seen that has changed in the last couple of years has been just that before immigration was based on your skill set, and you had an employment, you had a job, but now that is all seemed to be out of the way now. There's just the numbers, it's just huge numbers of immigrants coming in, the scale, the delta of how quickly the change of the immigrants, as well as the quality. You want more economic migrants, but now we have huge amount of temporary workers, and it's just the focus is no longer on the quality, but just quantity. And I think the key thing now is about fairness and balance. How are we going to be fair and balanced to established migrants here so that they can have a family, they can afford quality of life without having to pay for huge amount of cost for housing? How do we make sure that immigration doesn't have negative impact on housing, on youth employment, on schools, on education? And I think the way to do it, by my opinion, is to go back to a province-based immigration system and an employment-based immigration system that restores the competitive advantage so that immigrants that new and established can work together to build a better Alberta. Thank you.
Which leads us nicely into the question, should Alberta take more control of the immigration system to counter Ottawa's open border policies? Yes. Who says yes? Who says no? Okay. The ayes have it. And the last video is on provincial tax collection. Here it is.
Our next topic is the option of Alberta collecting all provincial personal income taxes, rather than having Ottawa do it for us. Today, when Albertans file and pay their personal income taxes, they do so through the Canada Revenue Agency, which then remits the provincial portion of those personal income taxes back to the provincial government. However, Alberta businesses file and pay their provincial corporate taxes directly to the provincial government. Quebec does it differently. They collect both personal and corporate income taxes directly from Quebecers, bypassing the CRA altogether. What if Alberta did the same? There would definitely be startup and ongoing administration costs, but it would also mean bringing good-paying jobs to Alberta instead of funding federal employees in other parts of the country. Under Canada's Constitution, levying and collecting taxes is an area of provincial jurisdiction, and Alberta could transition over the coming years to collecting our personal income taxes, as we do with corporate taxes now. So what are some of the benefits to Alberta collecting its own personal income taxes? 1. Better provincial tax policy. Currently, Alberta sets its own tax rates and credits, but definitions and treatments of income are still largely tied to federal rules, which limits our flexibility to implement more effective and competitive tax policy. We saw this recently when the federal government changed the rules on capital gains for doctors and other professionals, and Alberta was effectively forced to follow those same rules as it related to provincial personal income taxes. If Alberta were to collect its own taxes, we could tailor our entire tax framework to better reflect our economic realities and provincial policy goals, while declining federal changes to certain portions of tax policies that detrimentally affect provincial income tax policy. This could open the door to streamlining calculations and simplifying provincial income taxes for Alberta residents. 2. Jobs and economic opportunity at home. Collecting our own taxes would also mean establishing the infrastructure and staffing to support it, creating thousands of good, high-paying jobs right here in Alberta, instead of funding positions in Ottawa or other provinces. 3. More Alberta, less Ottawa. By moving away from the federal administration of the CRA and collecting provincial income taxes by ourselves, Alberta can exercise more direct control over a core aspect of self-government, thereby increasing our provincial independence from Ottawa. But there are also potential drawbacks to consider. 1. A long-term commitment. Establishing Alberta's own personal income tax collection agency would not happen overnight. Estimates suggest it could take up to 5 years to fully build out the necessary systems and staffing. This would be a major logistical undertaking that would require a sustained commitment from Albertans and their government. 2. Significant financial investment. The estimated cost to implement Alberta's own tax agency ranges from $750 million to $1.5 billion over several years. Once operational, the system could cost up to $750 million annually and require hiring as many as 5,000 new public employees. These are substantial expenses that must be weighed against the benefits. 3. Potential for added complexity. There are also practical implications for taxpayers and businesses. Albertans would need to file separate federal and provincial tax forms, although online filing would likely ease that burden. There may also be increased complexities for businesses and Albertans working in different provinces throughout the year. Now, tell us what you think about the idea of Alberta collecting its own personal income taxes.
Okay, a few minutes on provincial tax collection, and then we'll take comments on any of the issues you didn't get to, that you didn't get to the microphone on, or something to do with Ottawa and Alberta Next. So we'll start with this one, and I got a couple of panelists I'll go to as well, but we'll start over here. Go ahead, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you very much, distinguished panel. I want to just say that quickly, I would be in favor of us collecting our own taxes here in Alberta. However, that is with the caveat that any of that money that is brought in and that is being distributed is going directly into healthcare and education. I have worked in healthcare for the last 14 years. We need to cut from the top of AHS.
Agreed.
There is no other answer. I'm the mother of 3 children. I just found out that my daughter going into grade 5 will go into a classroom that has 37 children.
Yeah.
This money needs to be directed into healthcare and education only.
Thank you for the question. Thank you for the comment. I think frontline workers for sure. Premier, I've heard you address it in healthcare many times.
Do you want me to, we face almost the opposite problem on healthcare and education in that we delegated the authority to different agencies to deliver on our behalf. So we have 66 school boards who we give money to, and then they deliver education. And we were giving money to AHS, and then they were delivering healthcare. When we started to take more control back on AHS, one of the things I was told is that there were only 2,500 people in administration. As we started going through figuring out who does not see the whites of eyes of a patient, we're now over 11,000. So that's one of the things that we discovered that none of the administrators at AHS were ever going to tell us. I could tell you more stories, but I'll just leave that as an example. And just look at the example that you gave. We can give about $12,000 to $14,000 per student in the public education system. So I just did the math. 37 kids in your class times $12,000 is $444,000. That's enough to hire a teacher and an education assistant and have probably 50% of that money left over. So where's the money going? That's what we're asking. We're asking that to the school boards.
It's a great question. Thank you.
And as part of the reason why we're doing the consultation on how special or how education assistants are being deployed, we've got 29,000 severe special needs kids. We only have 11,000 education assistants in the school systems. So we think that there might need to be more parameters that we set about how to give that support in the classroom, so that if you're going to have the larger sizes, you've at least got someone there to lend a hand. I know that that is a little bit off topic, but it was kind of in the reverse order.
No, that's fine. And complexity in the classroom is a great point, and that's why Minister Nicolaitis is looking into it and what we might do about it. I would just say, if people don't want to talk about provincial tax collection, if there were any of the other topics that you didn't get to speak to, go ahead and line up now, because I don't see a bunch of people on those. But let's go over here if we're still on provincial tax collection for a couple more.
I'd just like to say my name is Jennifer Stevenson. I've lived in this community for 20 years. I love it here until now. But anyway, I saw the tax brackets flash up very quickly. And my question is, we've talked about equalization payments here a lot tonight. A lot of the people in Fort McMurray, not me unfortunately, but a lot of people in Fort McMurray would be in the 10 to 15% provincial tax bracket. That doesn't include your federal, just your provincial tax bracket. So would that money stay in Fort McMurray? Like, would Highway 63, if any of you got to drive up it for this wonderful panel that you're being paid well for, if anybody drove up that, did you get any flat tires or break the tie rods off in your car? So will our money stay in Fort McMurray, or will it be used in all the other communities in our province to equalize everybody's, constitutional rights?
Thank you. Minister Jean, if you're looking for an assistant or somebody to help you, I think I found somebody that will advocate as strongly as you do in caucus for Fort McMurray. Go ahead. Premier, did you want to say anything to that, or should we just jump along? Because we've got a lot of people in line.
Well, look, I mean, we know that we have a number of investments that we have to make in Northern Alberta. As I mentioned, both your MLAs are here, and if you want to give them some feedback on that, it's the reason why we've announced Highway 686. It's the reason why we've announced that we're going to build a road to La Loche, so that there's a couple of different egresses and also a connection of the north. It's the reason why we're investing in schools, why we're investing in building out surgical centers, including putting the emphasis on rural hospitals and surgical centers, especially in Fort McMurray. Because it is so remote, we have to make sure that we've got the resources close to home, so that people are able to get the service that they need here. That wasn't the case under what we've seen in the last 10 years. We've seen services hollowed out. We're reinvesting back in. But I know that Bruce is quite right. Both Brian Jean and Teddy are absolute huge voices for making sure that we're addressing some of those gaps. So if there's some other things that you want to raise with them, they're here tonight.
That's it. Here. I think I just saw the microphone move to somebody in the audience. Can we go over here?
Hello, Madam Mayor, for Madam Premier. Thank you very much for you and your panel for coming here to our very nice community, very fine community. I remember your nice speeches from 13 years back when you came here with our very favorite personality, ex-mayor Guy Butler. God bless her, bless him, his soul. My point is regarding pension. I'm a little out of step. I got late also. My point is, for seniors, it's difficult living in the meager resources. Both wife and husband, have the pension and spend on each other. If one of them dies premature death, so it becomes further difficult. First thing is he or she loses his spouse, and secondly, the resources. So I recommend that some portion of the deceased spouse should also go to the living partner. How much it is you can do and help seniors, and that would be great of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for that comment. Can I get Andrew Judson to respond to that? Because Andrew has done some analysis of how we would not only be able, with the additional amount of premiums that people pay, we would not only be able to provide the same level of benefits, but those additional premiums could go into an individualized account for each person that would grow over time, and then when somebody died, they'd be able to bequeath it to their family. If we had our own pension plan, we'd be able to do that. I don't know, Andrew, if you want to talk about that?
Well, yes, Madam President, that's very well said. To be honest, I didn't author the paper, but the Fraser Institute released a report on the 14th of July on this very subject matter. And as I said previously, because the contributions in the Alberta-based system would fall by as much as half for the same level of benefit, the individual contributor would be able to take that, put it in a parallel private sector program, which exactly as the Premier points out, would be in a position to be bequeathed to the surviving spouse. So in that way, is one more example of how an Alberta contributor, and especially in a partnership, would be able to be, we think, well ahead of the existing system under the Canadian CPP. So it's viable. The math stands for itself. Again, it's an emotional issue, but that's one way in which the surviving spouse would be in a position to be far better off under a program as we've described.
Thank you, Andrew. Just stand by. I want to say to Minister Schultz and Melody, who I've not called upon yet. I'm going to momentarily, but let's go over here.
Hi, my name is Sarah. Today, for the first time in my career, I carried out 400 personally funded books out of my classroom. I'll be teaching without books for the first time in over 20 years due to the UCP's censorship. Our school library is now closed until further notice. Teachers are being forced to out children. This is not my job. Many of us have been teaching in classrooms where temperatures climb to above 30 degrees on hot days. Our schools are no longer safe as a result of chronic underfunding by the UCP. We are the lowest funded per student in Canada. While you highlight the economic contributions of our city makes to Alberta, our schools remain dangerously neglected.
So
I'm getting there. Premier Smith, if creating safer communities is truly your goal, why do you continue to ignore the safety crisis unfolding in our schools?
Thank you.
How can we trust your policing goals, pension plans, and provincial
Okay.
rights when you neglect our most vulnerable, our children?
Okay, so
Alberta
Next is what we're trying to do. Premier, totally your call.
I'll see if I can connect it back to the panel topics. One thing I would invite every one of you to do is to go online and look at the graphic images that we are taking out of elementary schools. I wouldn't be able to, no, I'm going to be honest with you, I wouldn't be able to hold up an image, because we're broadcasting this, I wouldn't be able to hold up an image without a warning of graphic image of pornographic materials, including detailed sex acts, because it would offend our audience. And if our audience, adult audience, would be offended by that, a 7-year-old shouldn't be watching that.
That's it.
So
Here, here.
I'm glad that.
Here.
And if this is not.
So one of the things that
so-
we need to talk about when we
so-
talk about tax collection is how different it is from what the feds do and what the province does.
So let me connect this
is
back though.
what I would like to ask.
Let me connect this back though, because that was exactly what I was saying. Is that we have to have what's responsible government means that you also have to have line of sight on where the dollars are going. And my earlier response to that other teacher, you can do the math too. How do you have 37 kids in a classroom? We're paying $12,000 per student, $444,000. Something is missing. Something is getting lost in translation, and there is too much administration, and we've got to address that. That would be the other part.
Okay.
And when it comes to safety in schools, I mean, one of the things that we are doing is that we're restoring confidence in our police service. There was a defund the police campaign that I think demoralized our frontline services. And that's part of the reason why we're reinvesting in Calgary, in Edmonton, in Indigenous forces, as well as in the sheriffs, so that we have more ability to not only do the policing in our local communities, but also be able to provide those resources in the schools the way we used to in the past. So that's part of the reason why we're also thinking that we will be able to have more local policing, more local decisions if we have more ability to take over that area. I'd linked it back, Bruce.
You did, except I just want to make a point. We've had a great night here. Thank you all for coming. So keeping it on task with what Alberta does next and what direction we should take with the federal government. Please bring those questions to the podium, and I won't have to ask the mic to be cut. But that's what we're going to stick to, because that's what we're here for. And if somebody else has another agenda, I'm sorry, but we're not going to play along with that. So let's go over here. And Adam, I'd like you from the Business Council of Alberta to consider the question on provincial and federal taxes and how your members deal with it. I'd like to come to you for context next, but go ahead.
Hi, I just want to thank everybody for coming up to our amazing town. My name is Sherry. I am a 6+ Albertan of generations. I was born here. My children are born here. However, right now, we're a family of 4. We're a one-income household. And come January till whenever we get our lovely government taxes paid off, we barely pay our bills. That's not even counting anything extra for my children. For us, we've got a medical child that we go to Edmonton for sports that we have to travel for because we live up here, which we choose to live up here. But yeah, that's my...
Thank you. And I wish I had an easy solution, but I don't. Holy cow. Brian Jean and Tanny Yao are both here. I hope that you'll meet with this lady, and I don't know what we might do, but maybe help her and her family out somehow. Can you, Adam, to the question I asked before we went to that lady, give us some context on provincial federal tax collection and how it impacts your members?
Well, I think a number of the proposals through the panel process are ways in which Alberta can create some competitive advantage. And from my members, who are many of the companies in Alberta, the way they try and continue to grow and to invest is to have the best people and the best talent. And if Alberta can continue to attract the best people, given they're going to choose to live other parts of Canada, other parts of North America, other parts of the world. And so from a tax collection, if the ability for Alberta to collect its own taxes and then do some unique and more competitive things creates an incentive to bring people to Alberta to work here, to live here. That is viewed as a positive. There's lots of aspects of this to be further analyzed and worked out. Other aspects like the immigration reform is also positively viewed, some of the constitutional changes, et cetera. I mean, at the end of the day, our desire is to see that there is fairness and functionality restored to the Federation. Canada is a work in progress, so we haven't figured it out, as we've seen many of the comments tonight and some of the information put forward. And you know, we firmly believe that Alberta is stronger in Canada than it is outside of it, and so that is our endeavor, is to continue to work on that. But we do need to see progress and change and things improve to better the fairness and functionality of the Federation, because we haven't got it right yet, and Alberta is being penalized, and our resource sector is being penalized, and we need to get to a better place in Canada from a fairness and functionality standpoint.
Thank you. Hey, Melody, on agriculture, I just wonder from an agriculture perspective, you're on a farm in the country, dealing with Ottawa, dealing with Alberta. What would your message be to people that aren't in that industry for them to know?
Yeah, so I'm going to actually flip that on its head because I don't like the way you asked it. Sorry, Bruce. I want to talk to you about food because what you just said, ma'am, is about food affordability and food security, okay? And so agriculture, that's what we do. We grow food, right, to feed citizens of Alberta as well as citizens of Canada and the world. And I think when we're talking about provincial taxes and we're talking about all of these issues, I link it back to good governance is about looking at all levels of government and making sure they are using money efficiently and effectively, and we have to review that on occasion. From the food security perspective and affordability for you and your family, there's things we need to change at the federal level. There's policies that are driving programs that are not necessary when you can't afford to put food on the table. We believe in supporting environmental initiatives as farmers and ranchers. That's how we make our living as well. What I don't need is someone mandating me to do it, which will drive my cost of production up, which means you pay more. And I think that's where we've got to find the balance.
Thank you, Melody. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Michelle. I'm a new graduate nurse. I graduated from Keyano, actually.
Congratulations.
Thanks. One thing I have witnessed so far in my short career is our surgery unit losing 15 nursing staff. This number includes RNs, PNs, and HCAs. This was in June due to the cutting of 10 beds from that unit. We had last year posted for 2024 graduates, many transitional nursing positions, as well as funded preceptorships, which were all taken from my class, so I did not have a funded preceptorship, and there have been, so far, no transitional nursing positions posted.
Hey, Melody, I promise you, your local MLA can take that on for you. What we want to do is the Alberta Next issue tonight, okay? So did you have a question on Ottawa, Alberta, and where we go next? Or you just want some help with your healthcare question?
No, sorry, I was getting to my question.
Okay.
My question is, given if Alberta Next takes effect, how much extra funding will be given to help local nurses, Fort McMurray, ensure they are getting jobs upon graduation?
Okay, great, thank you. I don't know that we have a number. Premier, go ahead.
I would say what we're doing is we're trying to make sure that the people who are in hospital are there for acute needs. What we find all over the province is that there are those who are, they're called alternative level of care patients. You probably could give us some insight into that. When we came in, we were told it was about 473 alternative level of care patients across all our hospitals. We've actually discovered it's 1,673. Out of about 8,000 beds. So when you have those patients in the wrong place, then it ends up crowding out the other type of care that you can give. I don't know that specifically addresses the issue that you raised, because we're supposed to be going in the other direction. We're supposed to be moving the alternative level of care patients into long-term care, mental health, and addiction beds so that we can free up more of those surgical beds. But it sounds like something glitched out there. So maybe we can make sure that you're talking to Tanny and Brian so we can chase that down.
100%. And please don't think I was trying to be dismissive at all. We want to help you with that issue, but tonight we want to focus on Alberta Next. And to that point, I want to call on Minister Schultz. Here's why. I think, here we are in the heart of oil and gas country, the engine that powers this province. If anyone is impacted by policies coming out of Ottawa, it's this community. It's this part of Alberta. It's all of us, but certainly here. And so to that point, you try to deal with people like Stephen Guilbeault in Ottawa. Now, fortunately, he's no longer the environment minister. But we don't brag far enough about all of the good environmental things that we're doing. You do, but Ottawa doesn't. Can you just go ahead and vent a little bit on some of the policies that you have to deal with and how our relationship should be improved with Ottawa?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for pointing that out. And thank you to everybody for taking the time to come. It's a beautiful evening outside, and I know everybody's busy as the summer is wrapping up, and you've all chosen to spend your evening with us, which I know we really appreciate. And thank you to all of you who do work in our energy industry. It is one that our government and I personally am so proud of. Not only because I understand that there is growing demand for energy across Canada and the world, but it does contribute to the overall economic well-being and jobs for people not only here in Fort McMurray, but right across our amazing province of Alberta. And so I would say, I mean, I have been over the last 2.5 years, part of my job, I wish it wasn't fighting with the federal government, but it really is defending Alberta against nonsensical and radical environmental policies that are not anywhere based in reality. Starting with the clean electricity regulations, this would cost billions of dollars. One independent report said that this would cost up to $1.7 trillion. That would also put our energy grid at risk. Imagine being in a rural, remote northern community and not in the middle of the heart of our energy industry and not being able to have enough natural gas to keep you warm in the winter or keep your air conditioning pumping on a day like this. That is what the clean electricity regulation will mean. Nobody wants to invest in natural gas peaker plants. Why? Because the standards that the federal government is asking for have not been proven anywhere in the world. So who's going to take a risk in investing in that when you don't know if you're going to be able to operate it? And the other risk is that the federal environment minister has the ability to throw you in jail for turning that technology on. That makes absolutely no sense, and that's not just Alberta saying that. The Ontario electricity regulator has also said that. Saskatchewan has also said that. We've heard it in Atlantic provinces as well. It makes no sense. The C-48, the tanker ban, we have a federal government who is out there saying that they are having discussions with countries around the world to deliver them natural gas. We're talking places like Germany, Poland. How can we do that? How do we expect those investments to happen when they have a tanker ban on the East Coast, when they have Bill C-69? Sure, they've done a workaround. It is very hard for anybody to want to invest in Canadian energy. Even with all of the uncertainty south of the border, investors are putting their money in America and not in Canada because of this federal government policy. Policies that the courts found Bill C-69 unconstitutional. Stephen Guilbeault told me that was just an opinion. That's the highest court in Canada. Well, I think he knows a little bit about breaking the law from personal experience, but, you know, here's the other thing. The emissions cap, this impacts this community directly. That would cost billions of dollars, $282 billion in lost GDP. GDP doesn't mean a lot to just an everyday family, but a number that does mean a lot to a regular everyday Alberta family is up to 90,000 jobs lost in Alberta alone and more than 100,000 jobs lost across Canada in other related industries. When you think about that being designed, and it's not designed to cut emissions, it's absolutely not. If we care about emissions, we would invest in our energy industry, get our energy out of Canada and share it with the rest of the world to reduce global emissions. This is about reducing production, which is an area of provincial jurisdiction, and it relates to our conversation about looking for constitutional changes. We have a federal government that's ignoring the Constitution that exists today. That's a problem. When those 90,000 jobs are lost and those people are no longer paying taxes, that absolutely means less money for healthcare and education, things that I care passionately about and my constituents care passionately about, as do people here tonight. When it comes to our environmental policies, we have reduced methane emissions by 53%. We did not do it the way the feds wanted to do it, and we saved industry $600 million, and we actually hit a target, something the feds have never done. We, in the oil sands, you actually, not we, I mean we as Albertans, but you who work in the oil sands, have reduced emissions intensity per barrel by over 21%. I think we're close to 22, 23, and more to come. We are leading the way. They expect you all to drive EVs by 2035. Who can afford that? Our grid can't sustain it. We don't have that. That would cost billions of dollars, $20 billion to build that grid. We don't have it. We absolutely don't have it. We don't have the money to do it. And I don't think you all want to be stuck in the middle of Alberta on a cold winter day with no way of getting from point A to B because your EV has died on the side of the highway. The attack on fertilizer, right back to food affordability. I actually asked Trevor Toom this when I got here today. I said, look, I've got a couple hours with an economist. I need to ask you about the cost of groceries because it's something that I find very painful, as do my constituents. One of the driving costs of that, the cost of fertilizer. What is the federal government attacking in ag? Fertilizer and our ag industry. And I also saw it in childcare. The first couple of times I came to Fort McMurray, I was the minister responsible for childcare. What did the federal government do? They offered us our own tax money back. They said they'd give us flexibility to do things the way we need to do it, and then they didn't do it. They've now created an expensive system that's not working anywhere in Canada, and you know what they're going to do? They're going to blame provinces and expect all of you as taxpayers to come up with the rest of the money. This absolutely isn't fair. It has to stop, and it does absolutely impact our ability as a provincial government to deliver the services that people rely on.
Thank you, Minister Schultz. So we're over time, but here's what we're going to do, okay? If you're in one of the lines, to the staff that's here with us, cap the line now. Whoever has not spoken yet, even though we're out of time, let's allow those people to have their moment, their 45 seconds. If you've already said your piece, I'm sorry. But let's start here. If you haven't spoken yet, what is your thoughts or comments on Alberta Next and dealing with Ottawa?
It was a comment that goes back to the taxes and when the number was thrown out again about the amount spent per student, which again is the lowest. You can throw out that number, but if you multiply 37 students by that amount, there's part of the first problem. Yeah. There should not be 37 students in any of those classes. Second is that once you take that number, sure, it may pay for a teacher and an aide. Who's paying for the principal, the secretary, the counselor, the heat, the lights, the technology, and everything else that goes into the school?
It's not Alberta Next, ma'am. Like, I'm trying my best, but it's got nothing to do with it.
Let me linkage. Let me do a linkage.
Okay, you do a linkage, Premier, but I'm not going to listen to somebody screaming at a microphone.
What we're talking about tonight is Ottawa over. Do you want to hear the answer? Ottawa overtaxing us. I mentioned that at the beginning of the evening. That our program costs are 70% of all tax dollars. We only collect 40%. Ottawa collects 60%, and then they use political means to transfer it. Alberta, year after year, has $20 to $25 billion that is siphoned out of our system to go to Ottawa so that it can be spent mostly in Quebec, but also in other places that vote Liberal. We have been watching this for years. $600 billion in the last 40 or 50 years that have been taken out of this province. You don't think we might be able to do a little bit more on social spending if those $20 to $25 billion stayed here? You don't think we'd be able to cut taxes a bit if those $20 to $25 billion stayed here? It is $5,000 per Albertan that every single year gets transferred out of this province for political reasons so that the Liberals can continue to spend it in places that vote Liberal. That is what is happening in the province and in the country.
Thank you. Okay, let's go up here again. If you haven't been to the mic yet, go ahead. If you've been to the mic, I'm sorry, we're going to just finish with who hasn't. But if you haven't, go ahead.
Thank you. I only have a comment in regards to Dr. Zhu's statement about how newcomers nowadays do not contribute as they did, and I'm just paraphrasing. My mom came to Canada with 2 degrees, and it took her 5 years to find a career that fit her expertise, which had already been commented on by Phyllis, I believe. So 2 decades later, she has now been recognized for her extensive volunteering service that she would not have been able to complete had her residence been denied after 4 years of not finding a job. So just to reiterate, not all immigrants have the same circumstances when coming to Canada. And I believe that immigration as a whole should be treated as an investment rather than just some kind of...
Do you think the numbers are good right now with
the numbers? Well,
the amount of people that are coming from the federal government, do you think we're at the sweet spot?
From the federal government?
Yeah.
I can only comment on the numbers in Alberta, and I know that the Alberta Advantage Immigration Program has been cut down significantly. And otherwise, all I can see is that people around me, people my age, have been just kind of completely inundated with racist misinformation that I have to deal with, that all of my friends have to deal with.
Well, know that that's not, you can hang out there for a sec. Know that that's not coming from here. I can tell you that Dr. Zhu wouldn't have meant anything untoward by what he said. But I can tell you the message that we're trying to get is that, too many too fast, and we just want to be smarter about it. And we're grateful for every immigrant that comes and contributes. Over here.
Thank you. Hi, Premier Jeevan here. First of all, I'd like to acknowledge that sitting in that chair is not easy. I've seen a couple of highlights on video. You get criticized, berated, people are angry, but you have courage to sit there and take it all. So I appreciate that. And I think, Bruce, you have the least amount of penalty minutes as Boreas Holming.
Probably.
Just a couple of comments. First is I've grown up in Alberta, so I consider myself Albertan first, not a Canadian, because looking back at the history of Alberta and how damaging the Liberal Party has been to Alberta, and if you examine history, since 1963, the Liberal Party has been in power except for two long-serving Conservative leaders, Brian Mulroney and Stephen Harper. Even Stephen Harper could not introduce the Triple E Senate. So nothing is going to change in this country because even the equalization payments that we discussed before, they will, Bruce Party is right, they will never be able to change the Constitution.
Jeevan, what's the solution? What's the solution?
Yeah,
and you're over 45. What's the
we
solution?
failed to address the 1996 Veto Regional Act as well, so consider that. So as an Albertan or son of an immigrant that's grown in Alberta has known that how damaging the eastern parties are to Alberta, I see no other way other than getting out of Confederation.
You want out. Jeevan,
that's
thank
Alberta
you.
Next.
Thank you, Jeevan. Over here.
Okay, thanks, panel, for coming up and listening to Fort McMurray. It's really special for us to have your ears here. I'm president of the Home Builders of Fort McMurray, Buildwood Buffalo. I'm also on the board of Build Alberta. I'm wondering, the question is about the provincial taxes. Is there something we could maybe do to tweak the provincial taxes so that we could have a surcharge on people who are flying in and out of Fort McMurray and taking the taxes, which I believe is billions of dollars, because our economy in Fort McMurray is really in trouble. I was on a meeting today. Grand Prairie is booming. Alberta is booming. I believe there was 59,000 starts in Alberta, and we had basically none. And we are the golden goose for the whole province. Is there some way to put a surtax on provincial taxes?
Premier, do you want to, or do you want to add it to your closing comments?
Well, I might just say, if there's others who want to speak, I might just say this is something that Brian Jean ran on in the leadership campaign. And I think the aerial tour we took to get today just shows there's probably 50,000 people living in camps if you look at the number of spaces that they have and the fly in, fly out.
Yeah.
And that's another example of people coming here but paying taxes in another jurisdiction. I have no idea what the value of that is because we don't really know, but it does give me a good talking point when I'm with the premiers about how every single one of them probably have thousands of people working and making money here in Fort McMurray from a product that they don't want us to continue to develop. So that's one part of it.
Yes.
But do talk to Brian afterwards because we have been talking about ways in which we can create some carrots and incentives for companies to be able to do to hire more locally. And I think some of it comes down to having infrastructure built so that it goes closer to some of the sites so that it's easy to commute in the morning. So it was a really good tour that we went on today. But do talk to Brian and Tanya about that.
Yes, and I just want to add, Minister Jean has pulled me aside and berated me to help on that issue and figure out a path through. We see the inequity, and we ought to come up with some kind of a solution. Over here.
Good evening, panel. Thank you for coming to Fort McMurray and talking to your citizens. It's a great action and democracy you're doing, and we need more of it. Thank you. Thank you. Second of all, my question is, has anyone ever asked the federal government why they radically increased immigration levels? Is their excuse just declining birth rates, or did they give another reason?
Well, Premier, you met with former Prime Minister Trudeau.
Well, I would say it's, if I could be generous about it, I think what happened was during COVID when no one was moving, we just weren't having the same numbers. So if you ended up looking at what our numbers were in 2020, 2021, and 2022, it was probably vastly below what our normal rate was. And it could be that they thought, well, let's just catch up to where we would have been if we hadn't had that disruption in flows. And wow, did they ever blow it? Did they ever get it wrong on every front, on the number of international students, temporary foreign workers, asylum seekers? And the place where we ended up reducing is on the economic migrants. And so I would say that maybe it's a combination of having a traditional model that relies so much on immigration disrupted, and so they tried to correct that, but they overcorrected, and I think that's what's causing some of the pressures that we have now.
There are many that would suggest the Premier is being far too generous in that response. Over here.
My name is Lindsay. I was just wondering, I personally hoping that these topics discussed tonight here are preparing us for separation down the road. What would happen if you put these things to a vote and some of them get no and some get yes? Would that mean we can't separate down the road?
Well, Premier, I don't know if you want to take it on at the end. The subjective ones are tough because, I mean, it'd be hypothetical.
Well, all I've said is, I mean, there is a petition that is collecting signatures right now, and I'm waiting to see whether or not it gets enough signatures to be put on the ballot. The way it's written is, do you want to remain in Canada? And the question would be yes or no. And we would have to sort of grapple with what happens if that gets on the ballot. And the answer is no. That's what happened in Brexit. I think that the Brexiteers put forward a very similar type of proposal, the ones who wanted to remain. Do you want to remain in the European Union? And I think they got surprised because no was the answer. So that is why I am hoping, and this is what our strategy has been, let's find ways to make the Federation work so people do not feel like they need to put a ballot question forward like that. That's how I feel about it personally. I have supported a sovereign Alberta within a united Canada. I don't know that it gets any easier to build a pipeline to the BC Northwest Coast if we are a separate country. I think it gets a whole lot harder, personally. But so that's why I've taken a bit of a different approach. But I respect the democratic process. I will wait and see what happens with that particular referendum question. And we'll put forward our own questions. That's what we're trying to get from the crowd here is, have we identified the right questions to ask? Are we missing anything that we should put forward? But when it comes to the question of independence, I'm leaving that to citizens to decide if they want that through the petition process.
We're just 2 minutes away, and I'm going to let the Premier bookend this night, and thank you all for being here and just give some closing comments on what we've heard. But there's still a couple of people that we haven't heard from in this line, so go ahead.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Mariah McGregor, and I am the parent of a 4-year-old boy with level 3 autism. We have now been waiting 427 days for an FSCD caseworker and FSCD supports. During that time, our family has been left in crisis. My son requires constant care, and without the resources FSCD is supposed to provide, we are struggling to meet his basic developmental and daily living needs. My family cannot afford to wait this long for essential support. How will the government ensure that my child with severe disabilities gets timely access to the services he is legally entitled to?
Thank you. Tanny, is MLA Tanny out here? If you are, just put your hand up. Could you go see this lady and help her out? I'm sure you will, and help her with her issue. Go ahead, who's next?
Hi, thank you for taking the time to host this town hall tonight. I hope that some of the questions and discussions here help you to understand and carry out the wishes of Fort McMurray and our people. A big part of what you're advocating for is putting more control and power in Albertans' hands, and more specifically, provincial government hands. A big part of that question for me is trust. We have to trust you about a new police force, Alberta pension plan, and trust you to protect my rights. My question, or my worry about this, is that it will also affect my constitutional rights. I have a unique experience for you, having my trust broken by imposing a dispute inquiry board in my efforts to freely collect a bargain. I would be interested in your comments about if Alberta was to separate, or moving forward, how you plan to gain workers' trust when we've had it broken before. And if this is a local MLA question, I want to let Tanny and Brian know that we're here tonight So 8 weeks on the picket line when you didn't show up, there is a group of us here tonight willing to talk to you. Thank you.
Anybody else on Alberta Next? I think we've got one more. Is that right? You sir, get to close us off?
Yeah, he's the last one. Yeah. Thank you very much to be here, and I'm honored, just a pleasure to be here. There's two things actually of concern for me. It's one, both of them actually, it's affected me so much. One is the immigration, and the second one is the tax. The immigration issue, it was disaster for the last few years, as everybody's aware, because without proper planning, the government actually dumped millions of immigrants to Canada without proper housing, planning, employment, nothing. What is the best plan you have if that actually goes to and Alberta government is overtaking on that one? That's one of the questions. Okay. The other thing is on the tax. I've been dealing with the tax for the last 31 years. I'm a tax guy, and I know exactly how the tax works. In Quebec, which I have the highest tax rate, and compared to Alberta has the lowest tax rate. How are you going to protect if we take the tax from the federal government to the Alberta and Albertanians to personal tax, which is the lowest in Canada?
Okay, thank you. I think what we'll do, Premier, if you could weave that into your closing comments, and I'd certainly like a minute to recognize the panel when you're done. But man, we've had a good 2.5 hours, almost 3 hours discussion tonight. We've got some great ideas. Any closing thoughts on what you've heard and what you want people to walk away with?
Well, there's lots, and I hear pressures, whether it's individuals feeling like they can't keep up. I feel we see the pressures of people feeling they're not getting access to services. We're feeling pressure on social services, and all of these things are connected. They are all connected, is that we don't have the dollars that we need to fund our areas of jurisdiction. And when we don't have that, we either end up running deficits, which we have for years, or we have higher taxes than people can afford, or we end up having queues and rationing. And none of that is optimal. And so the question is, what do we do to solve that? And I would just say, when we say that we have an Ottawa problem, I just want you to walk away remembering this, because it's so impactful on this region. If we had built Northern Gateway instead of having it canceled by the federal government, if we had built Energy East instead of them pulling the plug because they couldn't see a way of getting it through Quebec because of opposition, if we'd had a federal government advocating for us for Keystone XL, we today would be producing 2.5 million barrels of oil more per day. And those of you who know the value of each barrel, that is roughly $55 billion a year in additional GDP, of which governments take about 40%. The feds and us split it about equally. So you can do a heck of a lot if you have those dollars. You can build more health facilities, build more roads, build more schools. You can pay fair wages. You can hire more education assistants. But as long as we continue to have a federal government that prevents us from being able to generate the wealth, we're going to have these chronic problems. And, I suppose people can say, well, it's good enough. Maybe we only need to aspire to having 4.3 million barrels a day. But even still, even if we just stayed where we are, to have the federal government still taking $20 to $25 billion more per year while we end up short on all of the areas that are continuing to grow, that's a problem. When we talk about the pressures that we have on schools, heck, we had 200,000 additional students come here in the last 3 years because of immigration. When you look at, can you get a family doctor? Can you get a nurse practitioner? Some of the pressure is because we have more people here and we don't have as many doctors willing to take on more patients. When you look at the waiting lists in autism, I have people who tell me that they've moved here because they've heard that we have such great programs. And so we've got more people moving here to take advantage of our programs that we're not able to pay for the people who are the taxpayers here. So these are all connected, as I say. It's why we need to take more control over immigration so we have a sustainable amount and we're putting the economic interests first. And it's why we need to have more control over our taxes, and it's why we need to have more control over our economic future by being able to determine what our policy should be. Because we cannot achieve everything that everybody in this room wants to achieve unless we have more control over our destiny and more control, more particularly, over how we manage those dollars. So I would just ask you to take that away. It's part of the reason why we're going through the consultation. Anyone who gets involved in politics probably has been talking about these kinds of things for as long as I have, about 30 years. But the general public, they're worried about the day-to-day. And so that's what we're trying to vet is, are these issues that political parties talk about, are they something that the general public sees an interest in us doing? That's what we want to do. And to go back to what Michael Binion has said, is that at some point along your development, you have to decide, do we have the money, do we have the means, do we have the population that makes it make sense for us to take on more of the same kind of powers that the other big provinces have? Because Quebec has been doing them from the beginning, but now that we're our size, maybe we couldn't have done it when we were impoverished in 1932 and went bankrupt. Maybe we couldn't have done it when we only had 1 million people. But maybe we can do it today. And that's, again, part of the reason why we're doing these consultations. So thanks for your honest feedback, and we're glad that you came out tonight.
I'd just like to say before you all go, thank you for being so damn civil. And, we can disagree without being disagreeable. Appreciate the conversation tonight. And, a lot of people, political pundits, would recommend against doing these things. I just want you to know that you have a premier that says, no, we are doing these things. We are going to hear from Albertans in spite of, some of the turbulence we might meet along the way. It's worth it. So can we thank you for coming, and thank our panelists for volunteering, and thank our premier. Good night.